Hello, 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 my friends. It's Jill Osborne from the Interstitial Cystitis Network. And hold on a sec. There we go. Okay, we're good. It's time for another live IC support group meeting. Now, of course, it is a Sunday in the summertime. This means attendance is always going to be a little low. That's okay. I've got some news to share. I've got some information to share, and I am happy to stay as long as people have questions. If not, we will just go on and enjoy the rest of our summers. Now, my purpose in doing these meetings is to make you so strong, so knowledgeable, and so informed that no one can mess with you. I don't want anybody minimizing you, telling you that there's no hope, telling you that there's no treatment, telling you that you're damaged goods. My job is to give you hope because none of that is true. None of it is true. IC is treatable. IC is a pelvic pain condition. IC is not an incurable bladder disease. IC is a neuromuscular disorder for the vast majority of us. And we're no longer wasting time giving patients a bladder treatment and an antidepressant and an antihistamine and sending you on your way with the diet because we know that doesn't work. And we've known that for decades now. We have decades worth of research which shows that that doesn't work. Instead, what we're doing is we're taking a lot more time now to try to understand your underlying cause. When we identify the underlying cause, then we can provide the right treatment, and many, many, many more patients are actually getting healed. Now, you're going to notice I don't use the word cure. And the reason why I don't use the word cure is because there's not a disease. You cure a disease. And for many, if not most of us, it is nerves and muscles that are driving all of these symptoms. Listen, you've got the symptoms of frequency, urgency, pressure, pain. You're going bladder, 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 bladder. Well, I hate to break it to you, but your pelvic floor muscles and these nerves will also give you those symptoms of frequency, urgency, pressure, and pain. So a lot of patients are receptive to that concept and they're going to physical therapists like I did, and they're getting much, much better. But some of you are like, no, I don't believe you. I'm getting up at night to pee. It has to be my bladder. So I was working with one gentleman whose mother called me. He was and asked if I could help him. He was actually in his late 30s, but his mother was worried about him. And I completely respect that. And it's like, absolutely, I'd love to talk with your son. So I get on the phone with her son. And yeah, he's got symptoms that, hi, Donna, he absolutely associates with frequency, urgency, pressure, pain, and the bladder. And yet what was interesting about his case is when I asked him the question, when is your pain the worst, before you pee or after you're done urinating? He said, after I'm done urinating. My second question is, are you diet sensitive? He says, no, I can eat pretty much anything. It doesn't make me worse. I'm like going, oh, okay, well, that's very interesting. And then it's like, well, what do you do, sir? What do you do? Oh, I own a gym. Oh, okay. And I'm an Ironman. Haha, light bulb turns on. But what is an Ironman? An Ironman is literally the most elite athletes we have in the world. They will swim miles, and then they will bicycle many, many, many miles, and then they will run a marathon in one of their typical Ironman events. And to be a Hawaii Ironman is literally the best of the best, the cream of the crop. You got to qualify to get there. This gentleman was a Hawaii Ironman. So then I'm like, okay, so how many miles do you ride on your bike every week? About 200. Have you ever heard of bike rider syndrome? No. What's that? Well, think about your seat for a moment. The bike seat pushes directly up into your pelvic cavity and causes discomfort. Now, you guys on Facebook, are you okay? Can you hear me? You should be able to hear me. Let me just check my settings here real quick. I want to make sure I didn't lose my audio. Nope, the audio is correct. All right. So anyway, so here we have a gentleman who is on his bike for very, very, very long periods of time. He's doing massive workouts, power to him. But you have to consider what the bike seat does in the pelvic cavity, because the bike seat basically pushes directly up into muscles and nerves. Oh, thank you, Marlia. Hi, Ann. And so here he is. He's not diet sensitive. And he doesn't have pain as his bladder fills with urine. He's got pain after he's done urinating. So what does that mean? Well, what does that tell us? Pelvic floor. Throw in, combine what he does for a living. He's an extreme athlete. He does a massive amount of time on a bicycle. So again, I said, have you heard of bike rider syndrome? He goes, no. And I said, basically, that's a nerve compression. And this nerve compression can cause all of these symptoms because you're really not displaying any signs of bladder wall irritation. And he got really mad at me and said, I don't believe you. And he hung up the phone on me. I don't believe you. It's like, okay. Well, I called back a couple weeks later in worse shape. Jill, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. You're an expert on IC. What should I do? And I'm like, have you had your muscles checked? He said, no. I said, you need to get your muscles checked because your symptoms are not bladder wall driven symptoms. You're having pain after urination, not before urination or when your bladder's full. And most importantly, you're not diet sensitive. Go get your muscles checked. He very mad at me over the phone and yelled at me and again hung up the phone on me. Now, listen, guys, you got to understand, I have a really high tolerance. That's perfectly fine with me. Well, I called a couple weeks later in terrible shape. Absolutely terrible shape, crying on the phone. And you know, when a gentleman is crying on the phone, it's really a dire situation. And again, take a lot of time, try to explain this whole concept of nerves and muscles. And I'm like, what do you have to lose? I mean, he'd already been on antibiotics for a long period of time. He'd been on the antidepressants and all the other stuff. Nothing was working. It's like, dude, what do you have to lose? Go get your muscles checked. And again, he got very mad at me on the phone and said, I'm sorry, I don't believe you. But he was in terrible shape, right? Well, like 2 weeks later, he called me back from his car after he left the pelvic floor assessment. Jill, is this you? Yeah. Yeah? Hey, remember me? Yeah, I do. You're not going to believe it. You were right. I've got this really bad pelvic floor injury. And I'm like, oh, number one, I'm really sorry that this happened to you, but this is great news because now we know what to do. And now we know that it's a waste of time to do a bladder treatment with somebody with a severe pelvic floor injury. We have to do muscle therapy. And I always call that your hallelujah moment. If you go to a physical therapist and it hurt and they touch something and it triggers your pain, baby, that's it. What have you found? That is what I call your hallelujah moment. That's super, super exciting. So, that's very interesting. Now, just this morning on Twitter, I'm not going to call it X because I think that's stupid. On Twitter, I follow a lot of very, very good doctors and urologists. And one of them is Dr. Ashley Winter. Dr. Ashley Winter, who is a very outspoken urologist who works with IC patients, but pelvic floor patients, etc. And one of the things that she's been talking about is the importance of estrogen for patients who are not pelvic floor driven, but for patients who are estrogen atrophy driven. Because remember, we're not all the same. There's a lot of differences in the IC patient population. And our job is to figure out what your phenotype is, or what your underlying cause is, so that you can do the right therapy. And so, yes, we have a ton of patients with muscle issues, but we also have a ton of patients with estrogen atrophy, women specifically. And there's, estrogen therapy has had received a very, very, very bad review because of the misinterpretation of some research about 20 years ago. And in fact, what all the new research really shows now is that topical estrogen therapy, that's like an estrogen cream that you can use in your vagina or on your skin at the entrance to your urethra, is actually remarkably helpful in healing the skin and making the skin stronger. But one of the questions that we've always had is it safe to use topical estrogen when you are a cancer patient? And just this morning, a a cancer doctor responded, or Ashley Winter retweeted a message from a cancer doctor who said, yes, estrogen atrophy is safe even for patients with a history of cancer. Now, of course, why? Because topical estrogen stays in the skin. It's not like oral estrogen where you're swallowing it, it's being absorbed in your bloodstream, it's being sent throughout your body, where, yes, oral estrogen therapy, especially if you're over the age of 60, has been linked to breast cancer and things like that, uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, and stuff. But topical estrogen, which you put on your skin, just tends to stay right there in the skin. And the research that we have now shows that it's remarkably effective. But of course, I'm not a doctor. My job is to not give you medical advice. My job is to send you to your doctor and say, so I've been reading a little bit more about estrogen. I've been listening to some people online, looking at some research studies, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think about me using some topical estrogen to help with my issues? I was working with a patient who had terrible urethral pain. She didn't have bladder pain. She had urethral pain. Terrible, terrible urethral pain. And she had been already diagnosed with severe estrogen atrophy, but chose not to use the estrogen out of fear. And when I explained to her that the urethra is kind of like the canary in the coal mine when it comes to estrogen atrophy, she's like, oh, I didn't know. Okay, did the doctor give you estrogen? Yes. Have you used it? No. Why not? Because I didn't understand why it was so important and because of fear. So again, the moral of the story is the concept of cause versus effect. We got to try to figure out what your underlying cause is so that we can find the right treatments for you. Some of you are going to have Hunner's lesions. We have yet more research showing that those are often viral in nature. And we also have a brand new research study which shows that antiviral treatment seems to be very effective for Hunner's lesion treatment. We know that some of you have estrogen atrophy. We know that some of you have chemical irritation of your bladder or chemocystitis. We know that many, if not most of you, have a neuromuscular problem. And of course, then we also have our widespread pain subtype, which is patients who have IC, IBS, vulvodynia, multiple pain conditions. And that we know stems from an injured or damaged central nervous system. So we know what to do about that now too. And so your significant other had trace blood in their urine, supposed to get a cystoscopy, renal ultrasound, had urine checked again, and it was negative. Can this happen? Sure. Sure. I mean, this brings up and perfect timing, because in our brand new magazine, the IC Optimist, so the IC Network has a quarterly magazine that we do, although this year it's only going to be 3 because I had to combine our spring and summer. We happen to have an article on microhematuria and IC. Is it a concern? So gross hematuria means that you can see blood. You've got orange urine, you got dark urine, brown urine, you can see bright red urine. Gross hematuria really is very, very urgent. You could have a UTI. There could be something else that's going on. That's an immediate call to your doctor and say, hey, I'm peeing blood. What should I do? Microscopic hematuria is usually not that much of a concern, although the American Urology Association wants you to have a proper evaluation. In one IC study of patients with microhematuria, let's see, what was interesting. One study found that up to 30% of IC patients had some degree of hematuria. Of 148 patients, 61 were found to have at least one episode of hematuria, and the causes were benign. A simple renal cyst, renal stones, reflux nephropathy, and one with a sponge kidney. Cystoscopy, cytology, and biopsy did not find cancer in any of these patients. So I'm not really that worried about I don't even remember the last time I didn't have microscopic blood in my urine. I mean, pretty much every time. And every single time they're like, yeah, you're not a smoker. You're not in the big risk factors. They do a simple urine cytology test, which is a urine test to rule out cancer. And usually you're good. So anyway, I see Optimus. And actually, I want to apologize that I wasn't able to do a support group meeting last Sunday because a museum in Florida called us and they gave us 24 hours notice and they bought my father's entire estate of radios. You're not even going to believe, like over a ton of radios underneath my house. And if we had tried to sell it on our own, it would have taken years. And so we had a museum show up last Sunday and they took everything. And so I had to deal with that. All right. So Kayleen says here, I had a Mountain Dew today for my birthday dinner out there. So I'm waiting for Kayleen. Bam. Girl, what the hell? Come on. A Mountain Dew? Like the worst soda of all. I mean, if you're going to do a soda, do a root beer. I know. It's like, it tastes good and you love the flavor and you like the little bit of caffeine. Oh, honey, I wish you hadn't done that. But good luck with your flare. Maybe alkalinize your urine right now. Drink some water. Maybe suck on a couple of Tums or go on pre-lift to try to reduce any residual acid irritation. We all do it. I do it too. We all cheat. It's okay. All right, let's get back to the magazine. I just want to share some of the articles in here with you. And if you go to the IC Network website, you can buy individual copies or you can become a member. This is chock full of articles. Man, I don't think I've ever included so many different articles in a magazine, and they're all fine articles. I want to say damn good articles because actually they are. I always have a little meditation piece, and this is our meditation piece. We rise, we heal. I mean, hold on. We rest, we heal, we rise again. I always have a bit of a meditation page at the beginning of our magazine. So our first article is on the new research with inflammatory bowel disease and Elmiron use. That is very, very important because, you know, we've all known for many, many years that some patients who took Elmiron really struggled with bowel problems. But we didn't know the severity of it until the researchers at the Emory Eye Institute, as they were studying the eye issues with Elmiron, noticed that a lot, if not most of the patients they were working with who were having eye issues were also having really severe bowel issues called inflammatory bowel disease. And in fact, some of them actually had to have their bowel removed. And so last spring, they published their first paper on it, their first case studies on it, but they weren't the first. So in this article, I go through all of the early research. As an example, in 2005, gastroenterologists from Texas A&M University Health System published 2 case studies, which they believed showed a causal relationship between Pitocin use and colitis. Pitocin is the scientific name for Elmiron. A 29-year-old woman developed bloody diarrhea and cramping abdominal pain 1 month after starting the med. A colonoscopy revealed colitis extending from her rectum up to her transverse colon. Biopsies confirmed active colitis, but her symptoms completely resolved when she stopped using the medication. And in this other case, a 59-year-old female with a history of IBS developed increased diarrhea and lower left quadrant abdominal pain 2 weeks after starting Elmiron. Biopsies confirmed moderately active colitis, and her diarrhea and abdominal pain improved after she stopped the medication. In 2015, researchers at the University of Missouri and UC Irvine published a case study of a 32-year-old female with IC who had struggled with diarrhea for 7 months. She had abdominal cramping and loose bloody stools with approximately 20 bowel movements a day. How the hell can you get anything done if you're having bowel movements all day? They attempted treatments, nothing worked. However, when Elmiron was discontinued, her symptoms resolved in a few weeks. And in 2022, researchers last year at the Oregon Health and Science University did a significantly large study. They found 30 patients who met their criteria, 10 of whom had colonic dysplasia, and 6 of these patients required bowel removal, while 3 discontinued the medication and achieved total healing. And the point that they make is that this mucosal inflammation is a known risk factor for colorectal cancer. That dysplasia is a precursor for inflammatory bowel disease related colorectal neoplasia, thus early identification is critical. Pitocin users have a significantly higher rate of dysplasia at 33% than the 4% observed in the general population. And then this spring, the eye researchers at Emory published their study. And it's really quite eye-opening. Now, the question is what could be, I mean, guys, it's kind of slam dunk. You take the medication, you've got really severe bowel symptoms, you stop the medication, the symptoms go away, and the bowel heals. So I think that there's a pretty good evidence that there is a very strong association of the medication with bowel issues, right? But the question is why? Why would that happen? And this kind of gets back into the concept of a chemical injury. So one of the grisly sides of medicine, and remember, my first degree is in pharmacology, drug development. I gave up that career because of animal research. I love animals. I do not believe animals should be tortured for the benefit of humans when a rat does not match human physiology, or a monkey, whatever. I just don't believe it. I gave it up. So one of the ugly sides of IC research and IBD research is that they deliberately injure the bowel, and they deliberately injure the bladder with various solutions to try to mimic IC. And so in IBD studies, they use a medication called dextran sodium sulfate to artificially induce intestinal inflammation. But it just so happens that Elmiron, Pitocin, is also a sulfated polysaccharide with a similar structure. So they suggest that it could be injuring tissue over time, injuring tissue in the bowel over time. So anyway, there you go. And Aaron says here, Elmiron should be taken off the market, too many side effects. I really hope that it's getting a very strong scrutiny. And I do believe it should be reviewed much more intensely. A lot of that is going to depend upon the outcome of the lawsuits, right? Because there are lawsuits going on right now. Our second article is an in-depth article about the microbiome in IC, the urobiome in IC. Remember at the American Urology Association meeting a couple of months ago, Dr. Ann Ackerman at UCLA did some absolutely breathtaking research, which found that some IC patients might actually have a harmful lactobacillus called Lactobacillus iners in their bladder, causing direct bladder wall damage. Lactobacillus is a good bacteria. Normally we consider Lactobacillus good, healthy bacteria, but there happens to be one species of Lactobacillus which is not good, which is actually damaging. And she has found that in a subset of IC patients, particularly patients on bladder fill. So you can learn a lot about that in our magazine. We have an expert interview with Dr. Tara Sullivan. Now, Dr. Tara Sullivan is one of the teachers at the Herman Wallace Institute. And the Herman Wallace Institute is the premier training center for pelvic floor dysfunction. And so that's where most physical therapists get their training to become certified in pelvic floor work. So to have an interview with her is really quite amazing. We have our article on microhematuria. I summarized some of the important research that came out this year. And I think the most compelling research study actually is the Epstein-Barr study in patients with Hunner's lesions, which actually came from Russia, which really surprises me. I think this is the first time that I've actually featured a Russian study. Oh, no, I'm wrong. It's not Russia, it's China. This exciting study from China sought to identify the Epstein-Barr virus in patients with Hunner's lesions and to determine if the antiviral medication valacyclovir is an effective treatment. Patients received treatment 500 milligrams a day for 4 weeks, and urine samples were analyzed for viral DNA using typical next-generation PCR testing. And among 28 patients who received it, Epstein-Barr was detected in 3 patients. Let's see, hold on. Let's see here, hold on. Patients received treatment 500 milligrams a day for 4 weeks. Urine samples were analyzed. Transcriptomic analysis revealed an elevation of Epstein-Barr infection pathway genes in Hunner's lesions. And the flow cytometry assays revealed both Epstein-Barr latent genes and lytic genes. Among 20 patients with IC who received this, Epstein-Barr was detected in 3 patients at baseline at the beginning of the study. The VAS pain score in the patients with IC was significantly decreased at the end of the study. Urinary Epstein-Barr was not detected in all samples after valacyclovir treatment. Remember, what's one of the great mysteries is what causes a Hunner's lesion. So now we've got multiple studies that have linked Epstein-Barr and polyomavirus potentially to lesions. Gosh, you know what? There was somebody I was working with last week who was diagnosed with hemorrhagic cystitis. Hemorrhagic cystitis is just cystitis where the bladder is bleeding profusely. And nobody had checked for viral infections. And they were really stunned when I said, you know, we now know that there are viruses that can actually cause this very, very bloody cystitis. And we sent them back to their doctor to see if they might have a virus causing that. We have an article in here on long-term effects of toxic exposure on veterans, because a number of active duty and veterans struggle with urinary problems, very similar to IC. Now, here's one that's very, very near and dear to my heart. You know, it's crazy that school is beginning here next Monday. Tomorrow, school begins. Now, when I was a kid, school began after Labor Day. I think they're being robbed of another 2 weeks of summer, to be quite honest. But anyway, school is beginning. So I want you to think about that child. I was one of those children who had to use the bathroom all the time. How are we treated? Now, when I was in elementary school, things were good. My urinary frequency urgency didn't hit until 7th grade, and I couldn't sit through class. And the teachers' reactions were not good. You know, they accused me of just whatever. No, Jill, you can't use the bathroom. And eventually they got the nurse involved, who got my mother involved, who got the doctor involved, and yada, yada, yada. So we get the diagnosis, which for me back then was a urethral stricture, but that didn't solve the problem of me needing to use the restroom. I still had to use the restroom fairly significantly. Would the teachers be receptive to that? Especially in today's climate where schools are, quite honestly, especially junior high and high schools, are quite a bit more violent than they were when I was younger. And so there is a very strong desire to want to limit that violence. So some schools lock their bathrooms in between classes or during the class time. They only unlock them when you're changing classes. Others will actually give students detention, 15 minutes detention, 30 minutes detention after school for simply needing to use the restroom. So, and lawsuits have happened. But anyway, I've got a great article in here, Back to School Strategies. And I separated between elementary and high school. And so if you happen to know anybody who has a child with IC, please let them know that they can just call me and I will send them this. They don't have to pay for anything. We want to make sure that these kids are treated with compassion and kindness and not made to feel bad. Really, really good tips here. Excellent, excellent tips. This is one of the best articles we've ever done. Another one of my projects is making sure that we have good resources for elderly men and women in convalescent homes who might have IC. You think about, so I had a lady call me Well, her son called me for help. She'd been diagnosed with IC. She was in a convalescent hospital. Obviously, a very, very severe estrogen atrophy patient. There's just no doubt about that at her age, because I think she was in her late 80s. And she was basically crying all day, so much so that they were starting to sedate her. And she was begging them for help. They weren't helping. She was begging her son. They found me. I got on the phone with her. You know what they were giving her every morning? So here you have a woman with severe estrogen atrophy, right? A very strong history of active urinary symptoms. Do you know what they were forcing on her every morning? Coffee and orange juice. Coffee to trigger a bowel movement and orange juice to be healthy. She did not even get water in the morning. And so anyway, I ended up working with it's like, all right, where are you? Give me the name of the facility. Let me call and speak with the dietitian. And so I then get a hold of the dietitian, put this big packet of information together, send it off to them. They modify her diet plan. They eliminate the coffee, they eliminate the OJ and all the other crap they were giving her. They might have even been giving her cranberry juice. And she got better. She got better. And she lived another year or two. And she actually mentioned me in her will. And she gave me $5,000. This was about 20 years ago. I was stunned. And she wrote what she wrote in her will is, Jill is the only person who believed me and helped me. And I was so touched by that. I was just so, I mean, I only talked with her twice. And here a couple of years later, I get this call from her son saying, hey, my mom passed away, but she loved you and you helped her. So that's just a real big cause for me, or people who can't speak for themselves. We also was working with a mother who had a daughter with cystic fibrosis. No, what did she have? She had a cerebral palsy, very, very severe cerebral palsy. And she had IC and she couldn't speak. All she could do was kind of squirm. And she was in a lot of pain. And so we really took a lot of time to work with her and her family too. Kayleen says, I can't remember what's the difference between UroBlue and Elmiron. When I was first diagnosed, they prescribed me Elmiron until insurance denied it. My doctors tried submitting UroBlue and the insurance denied that. My doctor said UroBlue only turns to urine blue. Elmiron is a bladder coating. That's all it is. It's a passive bladder coating. UroBlue has a bunch of different ingredients in it, like methenamine, I think is an ingredient in it, as well as kind of a numbing agent, as well as something that will help try to prevent UTI, I think, if I remember correctly. So they're completely different medications. Now, here we spent a good amount of time thinking about children. And then, I thought of my dear friend Karen, who's a teacher. And it's like, wait a second, have we ever written an article for teachers with IC? Because when we did the professional assessment to try to figure out what professions were most correlated with IC, which was fascinating. And I should do it again. I mean, we did that about 15 years ago. And we had thousands of responses, right? The number one profession associated with IC was teaching. The number two profession was nursing. So why would a teacher be more prone to developing bladder symptoms? And the answer kind of comes right back to restroom access. If you're an elementary school teacher, your only chance to dart to the bathroom is when your kids are at recess or at lunch. Who knows when you need to have a bowel movement? The sticky wicket in the middle of the workday when you can't leave your kids alone. If you're on yard duty, guess what? You have no access to a restroom. You've got to be out watching the kids on yard duty. So teaching with IC can be really fraught with peril at times, especially elementary school. So we did this great article, Tips for Teachers with IC. that goes through really the key issues that most teachers face, which is number one, restroom access. God forbid you be a new teacher assigned to a new school and your classroom is at the far side of school, far away from the bathroom. And remember, teachers usually use the teaching bathroom. They don't use the student bathroom. And so do you, in your 5-minute break, do you have time to walk across school, drop trout, do your business, get yourself back together and walk back to your classroom? The answer is no. Restroom access is very, very difficult. Number two, doctor's appointments, making time for doctor's appointments. Number three, field trips can be very, very challenging. And one of the, now my mom was a retired elementary school teacher. And, listen, we want to keep you teaching. We need good teachers. The more teachers we have who love the profession, who love children, the better. My mother was a spectacular elementary school teacher. It broke her heart to retire, but she was older and she needed to retire. One of the funny traditions of teaching is that on Fridays are snack or treat days. And so one teacher is required to bring in everything that for the other teachers as a snack. But if you've got IC, you're not going to be able to eat the nachos or the pizza. And it's very important that we bring a little bit of grace and forgiveness to that situation. So anyway, I got a really good article for teachers. This is also something that's very, very near and dear to my heart, which is consumer alerts. Alcohol, sugar warnings mount, or artificial sugars warnings mount. We certainly know as IC patients how harmful NutraSweet aspartame can be. Very well known for triggering really severe bladder irritation. The World Health Organization has now recommended no consumption of any artificial sugars at all. The only thing that they left out of that were sugar alcohols. But we have research on this spring from the Cleveland Clinic, which has linked sugar alcohols like erythritol to strokes. It causes blood clots. God forbid you be a former COVID patient already struggling with blood clots and you do erythritol, you're really increasing that risk. Stacy Shannon, our wonderful writer, contributed 2 articles on exercise, how to exercise in hot weather, and also a fabulous article on swimming. Dive in with confidence. But our last article is a really interesting article. And it was written by Beverly Lauman. Now, Beverly Lauman is a dear friend of mine, and she's now retired. She wrote the very first book on the IC diet called A Taste of the Good Life. And in my opinion, she's the single most knowledgeable, educated patient in the world. She's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I'm no slouch, and she's better than me. Absolutely, absolutely. She was a PhD student in like biochemistry when she got IC, and she had to drop out of school. So anyway, she has been diving into kind of the intricacies of diet. And when you look at our diet list, one of the things that's typically on a diet list is soy products, especially heavily treated, what's the right word, aged, seasoned tofu products and soy sauce, things like that are certainly known for triggering more IC discomfort. Well, she wrote a brilliant article on soy. And I just want to, she's got 3 case studies in here that I want to share with you. Erin says, thoughts on pickleball. I played but was very sore the next day. Should I play through it or quit? I would play. You got to listen to your pelvic floor. There are actually statistically a lot more injuries associated with pickleball in the emergency room than tennis. So I'm going back to playing tennis. I'm just trying to find the right shoe. If I can find the right shoes. Okay, so I just want to read a couple of things in here. Lily's story. Lily had IC-BPS for more than 20 years. She felt she had her symptoms pretty well under control and rarely had flares. On this day, she was in a hurry to get home from work and just had one quick stop to pick up groceries. And at the store, she headed straight for the bread aisle. She didn't see her favorite whole wheat bread. The store had suddenly stopped stocking it, and she'd gone without it for several weeks. And in its place was a stack of another nationally distributed brand. She checked the label for things she was sensitive to. The preservatives were ones she was okay with, so she figured it would be fine. She tossed one in her cart. Over the next week, she used the bread for everything from French toast to turkey stuffing, and it didn't seem to bother her bladder, so it became her new bread of choice. But about 3 weeks later, Lily noticed that her bladder seemed slightly more sensitive than usual. What lousy timing, she thought. For the past week, she'd had more than her usual amount of interest in her husband's physical affections. Then maybe that's the cause of my flare up. In other words, she was having sex. She thought, not too much of a good thing irritating my bladder. I'll try staying away from that for a couple of weeks and let my bladder heal up. But even sexual abstinence didn't help. Her bladder was hurting more and more every day. She began regularly taking pain pills that her doctor gave her. By the time she'd been eating the bread daily for nearly 5 weeks, she was in a constant and increasingly severe icy flare. But by then, she didn't associate her pain with the bread. After all, hold on. Most of her food-triggered flares she'd ever had came within hours of eating the offending food. Only on very rare occasions would one hit her the following day. When she couldn't take it anymore, she called in sick at work. She called her doctor to check for a bladder infection or a vaginal yeast infection. There was nothing there. She checked and rechecked the labels on the food she ate. Nothing her bladder reacted to there. Now she was getting frustrated. She couldn't figure out what was causing the flare-up in her bladder. Her doctor suggested maybe the disease was just going through a normal phase of fluctuation, worse for a while and then better for a while. She was just in one of those worse phases, and he suggested that she increase the dosage of her usual icy medication. Now, his explanation sounded logical, all right, but his explanation for her plight just didn't feel right. She began taking more of her usual icy meds as he recommended, but the flare continued. Was her medication beginning to fail? What if everything that worked for her suddenly stopped working? She sat alone at her home with her heating pad. Her mind wandered to increasingly catastrophic scenarios. She felt helpless and scared and mostly depressed. The pain just seemed to keep on, and there wasn't anything she could do about it. She'd been home from work for about 2 weeks and was seriously thinking about going out on disability. Then one morning, she stood in the kitchen and read the bread ingredient label while she was waiting for her toast to be done. And there it was, towards the end of the ingredient list, soy flour. How can a bread called 100% whole wheat have soy flour in it? How did they get away with that? She then remembered seeing soy products on a list of icy foods to avoid. Her bladder did flare up with aged and fermented products like soy and tofu, yet on several occasions she'd eaten soybean oil and some fried soybean snacks with no problem. She wasn't allergic to soy either, at least she thought she didn't think so. So if the bread soy flour was a problem, wouldn't it have made her bladder flare up then the first day or two? Just throw the bread out. Anything's worth a try, her husband volunteered. And within a week of tossing the bread, the flare began to subside. And 2 weeks after that, she was back to work and her bladder was back to normal. Isn't that interesting? Now, Trisha's story. Trish was recently diagnosed with IC. She'd been experimenting with diet since her doctor gave her a list of foods to avoid. And she knew which foods bothered her bladder. She'd eaten grilled ahi tuna on several occasions with no problems, yet she'd recently been eating canned tuna in a favorite recipe, and every time she tried it, within hours, her bladder was on fire. What added insult to injury was that the tuna also gave her a case of sour stomach and indigestion before the bladder pain came on. So she switched from tuna and oil to tuna packed in spring water, but the change made no difference in her bladder pain. When she made the recipe with canned chicken instead of tuna, however, she had no bladder flare. She was sure canned tuna was making her IC worse. So she checked her doctor's list again. She checked 2 different IC diet lists on the internet. None listed tuna as a food to avoid. So why were the flares happening? Finally, she called another IC patient, and together they tried to figure it out. Since her friend's bladder flared when her allergies did, the friend asked Trish about possible food allergies. No, Trish said, I don't have any allergies at all, actually. I don't think I'm allergic to tuna. I've had grilled tuna plenty of times without a problem. Trish read the label. The can here says tuna, water, hydrolyzed soy protein. Could it be the soy protein? Soy sauce is something I avoid. Could the soy protein be a problem too? Trish tried other varieties at her store that contained only tuna and water and experienced no flares. Her tuna recipe minus soy protein is now back on the dinner table at Trish's house. Unlike Lily, Trish's reaction to the hydrolyzed soy protein was quick and dramatic, occurring within hours of eating it. Most IC patients report that their reactions to soy sauce, tofu, or hydrolyzed soy protein are like Trish's. They're fairly speedy. And then she shares her own soy story in here too. All right, so that's really an absolutely fabulous article for anybody who's struggling with a long-term flare, especially if you're IC subtype 2 bladder wall driven. All right. This is our magazine. So if you'd like to subscribe, come on over to the IC Network website and you'll see a blog that features this article, or you'll see a pop-up window where you can sign up for a newsletter, or there's a pull-down menu where you can actually sign up for the magazine. The newsletter is different than the magazine. The newsletter is free. The magazine is paid for because this is how I pay my bills. Okay? It is what it is. And I don't want to forget here, since that article mentioned fire, I do really want to extend our deep, deep condolences to our IC friends in Maui. I've been working with a newly diagnosed patient in Maui for the last couple of months. She's been in very, very difficult straits. And I really hope and pray that if you're watching this, that you're okay. My heart goes out to everybody in Maui and Lahaina who has gone through this terrible firestorm. As somebody who has lived through several firestorms and had to drive away from flames, the trauma is real. The PTSD is real. I have PTSD just watching the Lahaina footage. And so if you can try to think about a way that you can support the rebuilding of this wonderful, wonderful historical small town called Lahaina. Heartbreaking. This is the future, guys. Why would a tropical island with massive amounts of rain burn? Because their rain levels have dropped 31%. They're getting dry. And when you get dry, you burn. All right, let me go to your questions here. Peggy says, hi. Hello, Jill. Hope all is well. My first appointment with my pelvic floor physical therapist is on Wednesday. I'm excited and scared at the same time. I truly believe that I have pelvic floor dysfunction. I'm trying to stay positive. If you have any advice on my first visit, I would appreciate it. When did you know, after going through this yourself, that you started feeling human again? Thank you so much for all your advice. So, number one, Peggy, congratulations. This is probably going to be the single most important appointment for you. So this is very, very exciting. Now, remember, the purpose of going to somebody completely neutral who's a specialist in muscles in particular and nerves is to get a new set of eyes looking at your pelvis. Okay? So you're not going there for IC. You're going there for an independent evaluation and a looky-loo at your anatomy. The first thing you have to understand is what you say to them is the roadmap. And so I want you to walk in with a list of your symptoms, especially your weird symptoms. So it's not just, hey, I can't sleep through the night. Yes, I have pain when I sit for a long period of time. Yes, I might have pain when I have sex. It's about once a month, once every couple months, I get a pain that shoots down my leg, or my foot goes numb, or the inside of my thighs get really tight, right? Your ability to describe your symptoms will give them a roadmap. You don't just say, I have pain. Not helpful. You got to be specific. When is the pain the worst? When is the pain the best? What makes the pain worse? How does the pain change during the day? What does the pain feel like? Where is the pain located? Left, right, centered, etc. Okay, they're going to then do, and you know, guys, I'm just like itchy. It is the summer. I apologize for being squirmy. I'm just kind of annoyed and itchy with my skin. So bear with me here. This happens every summer at the end of summer when things get super, super dry. So I apologize if I'm squirming and touching my skin. And Peora helps tremendously, I got to tell you, but dry is dry and I'm dry. And I've already walked today and I'm sunburned. Okay. The physical therapist is going to start externally. And they're going to like have you walk up and down a hallway. They want to see how you're walking. They're going to measure your legs. You have one leg longer than the other. They're going to look for tension patterns. Are you tight anywhere? Do you have low back pain? Are you tight in your back? Do you have tightness in your thighs? I was working with one patient who had trigger points all up and down the inside of her thighs. It was that dry. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. And then they're going to ask if they can do an internal exam. And that is the single most important part of the exam. And so we want them to do the internal exam because that's how we touch muscles. That's how we touch muscles, is we find these muscles on the inside of the hip bones. I was looking for my model, which I've already put back up on my shelf. So if they can, so they're going to do this vaginally for women, rectally for men, and you're not in stirrups. It's nothing gross like that. You're just laying on a table with your knees up, very gentle, very soft, very easy. And they're going to use a finger to just gently touch muscle groups. Okay, just gently touch muscle groups. And if they can touch a muscle and trigger discomfort, that's huge. That's so exciting. And your immediate reaction is going to be, that's it. What are you touching? And I want you to walk out of that appointment with the names of the muscles that are tight. Is it your levator? Is it your obturatus? Is it your piriformis? Because once you have that knowledge of the muscles that are tight, then we can embark upon a proper and effective pelvic floor muscle rehabilitation. And it's not Kegels. Kegels will only make it worse. Kegels will make it worse. So they will also, generally what they do is they also give you some exercises that you can start doing at home. I was working with a patient in Australia, which is very, very interesting, you know, because we do a lot of coaching. We do it over Zoom. We make the time zones work. Sometimes I'll be up at 2 a.m. working with a patient on the other side of the country. So for anybody who's watching this, who's in another part of the world, don't worry. We can still work together. We can still find a way to try to help. Anyway, in his case, what was so interesting, and this is something that we really see in men, that many men who develop the symptoms of frequency, urgency, pressure, pain, they fall down the prostatitis hole. Oh, it must be your prostate. Let's put you on antibiotics. And they'll do antibiotics for a good long time, 6 months, a year. They don't work. Then they'll put you on prostate meds like Flomax, things designed to help you urinate. He was having trouble urinating. So they put him on Flomax. But in the end, really wasn't working. And he was really struggling at night with feeling, he's just struggling with sleeping. Like he wasn't able to void completely. And when he tried to go to the bathroom, there was a big hesitation. He just couldn't start a stream. And so we're kind of going through our subtypes. And of course, if you've watched me in these meetings before, we, really strongly believe that 90 to 95% of men diagnosed with chronic prostatitis have muscle issues, right? And so it's like, so we start bringing up the concept of muscle stuff. Turns out he was a big bike rider. Loved riding bikes, and his history. So we start going through his history. Oh my God. I mean, the guy did sport after sport after sport, long associated with tight pelvic floor muscles, as well as having a couple of pretty bad injuries. And what's so interesting, because I was also an elite athlete when I was younger. He's absolutely also was an elite athlete. And it's just like, dude, you're my brother at this point in time, you know. And they had looked at his bladder, completely healthy bladder. There's nothing physically wrong with his bladder. But he really wasn't on board with really thinking that his pelvic floor was causing all of these issues. And when I went through, kind of the sport after sport after sport, it's like, oh yeah, that does that. Yeah, that does that. That does that. So we're sending him off to pelvic floor physical therapy also. And it's going to be important. I think he's going to get a lot better. Listen, the thing you got to understand about physical therapy is you're not going to get better right away. I want you to really have a sense of what you're trying to accomplish here. What we're trying to do is improve muscle tone. If your muscles are tight, that's bad because it restricts blood supply. If your bladder is supposed to get 24 units of blood a day and it's only getting 10 because your muscles are so tight, you're going to have a healthy bladder? You're going to have a healthy prostate? You're going to have a healthy anything down there? And the answer is no, because you're in a state of ischemia. So our therapeutic priority is to restore blood supply. Way we do that is with physical therapy. And some people, unfortunately, drop out of physical therapy 2 weeks later because they go, I'm not getting better. It's like, you're not understanding what we're trying to accomplish. You will get better eventually, but right now what we got to do is get the blood flowing down there. And you might not feel that right away. And the same thing is true with estrogen therapy, topical estrogen therapy. A lot of women stop their topical estrogen like in 2 weeks. Well, it's not helping me, Jill. And it's like, you got to think about what you're trying to accomplish here. You have really, really dry skin. We have to fix that. Estrogen fix that. Is it going to make your frequency urgency go away right away? No. We got to break this down into simple areas where we know there's a problem. We want to try to fix that. We want to take small steps in the right direction to get your health better, your pelvic health better. And that means improving skin health and improving muscle health. So I'm really proud of you for going to physical therapy, and let's see what they find. You got this, Peggy. You got this. Denise, why did I suddenly develop irritation reaction? Oh, I didn't turn that on. Hold on. Why did I suddenly develop irritation reaction from estradiol? On it for 2 years, and it helped now. The itching, burning are out of control. It is not a compound. And question, do you just put it on the outside, or do you insert with an applicator? Both, honey. So I think that Denise, the most plausible scenario is that they reformulated it. And they might have put a new preservative in it, which has alcohol. And I mean, that's very, very common. And that's why compounded estradiol is actually better than brand name estradiol. When you think about the brand names like Premarin, Estrace, they want shelf life. The longer the shelf life, the better. And so those products have more preservatives, especially the Premarin, which has the potential of causing more irritation. Whereas the compounded estrogen creams, you can ask them to be preservative free, which dramatically reduces their ability to irritate your skin. So that would be concept number one. I would want to know the health of your skin. I would want somebody to look at your skin. It may be that your estrogen levels have just dropped so significantly that the amount of estrogen you have is not going to be enough. But I would also really want to know what's going on with your pelvic floor. Because if your pelvic floor is super, super tight and restricting blood flow, that's also going to make your skin very sensitive. Have you changed laundry detergents? Are you now using a fabric softener? If you have, get rid of them. Your laundry detergent, and no fabric softeners at all. Anything that leaves a scent in your underwear has the potential of irritating now older estrogen atrophied skin. Are you wearing mini pads, especially super thin mini pads? When they get wet, they gas off, and that irritates the skin down there. What else would we be looking at? Have you changed bath soaps? Are you using a douche, anything at all like that? Let's think about a chemical irritant for that skin also as a possible cause. Peggy said, one symptom I have is a hesitation before I urinate, like 20 seconds. Well, that's tight pelvic floor muscles usually. Mary says, hi, Jill. I meant to message you, but I want to help with IC Awareness Month. I'm ready to pop off. This condition is under-recognized. Thank you. I still have not written our press release for IC Awareness Month. I'm the one who writes that. What are we going to talk about this year? It's been a difficult, normally I would have all this done in June, but my parents died and I couldn't have written a word if my life had depended on it back then. I was thinking yesterday that I might just go the either the estrogen atrophy route or the tailbone injury route as a plausible, potentially newsworthy press release for IC Awareness Month. Mary said, let me know what I can do. Get people to tell their story. Yes, we need, see, here's the thing with the media. And I've got press fact sheets on our website. I've got audio to record PSAs, public service announcements on the icawareness.org website. We've got all of our past press releases there. We have a lot of posters. You can literally download a PDF of beautiful posters created by IC patients and pass them out. There's so many ways to participate in IC Awareness Month. One of the best things that we can do with IC Awareness Month, though, is literally just tell your story. Because here's the deal. Newspapers don't want to talk about a national organization. They want to hear how a life has been changed for the better, for the worse. And ultimately, one of the most effective ways that we can spread the word about IC is by going to your local paper and saying, hey, you know what? You've never told a story about or written a story about how doctors ignore or minimize people seeking for help with urinary frequency urgency. I mean, there are just a lot of different ways to kind of go about it. They like hero stories. They like the stories of somebody who's really, really suffering, and all of a sudden they got better when, they learned something new that their local doctor didn't know. What else have we done? Restroom access. I was working with a patient who was filing a complaint because she was denied a restroom access in a store that she frequents, and she was treated very, very badly. And she was diving into the law for that. She really wanted to bring a complaint against the organization. I've been there. Yeah, so tell your story. And ideally, in addition to, and what you can do is just go to their website. Normally, there's an email address for the editor, or you want to look for the health editor if they still have health editors. A lot of newspapers have gotten much smaller and they've gotten rid of the auxiliary editors, but if they have a health editor, that would be ideally. You send them our press release and send them our story and say, hey, we'd really love it. I would really love it if you could tell my story. And they will also respect your anonymity. They won't necessarily use your name. They will change your name so that if you don't want your name shown. And I think a really good case is somebody who was diagnosed with quote unquote interstitial cystitis, who did Elmiron for 20 years, who's now going blind from it, only to discover after the fact it was never their bladder in their first place. It was actually their pelvic floor. And when they did pelvic floor therapy, they got much better. Okay, hold on a sec. Denise, getting back to Denise, who's in a wicked flare. Skin flare. I use mini pads because I have a slight leak, so I have no choice. I use Poise. I've tried Poise, and the ones you showed us your mom, bleach-free, chlorine-free. I could open up a leaky pad story. Anything I can do to stop those pads to irritate me. When I use estradiol cream, I get even more sensitive and sore from the pads. Let me go get the pad that I use. Hold on. So you guys know me. You know that I have no shame. I will pretty much talk about anything. I mean, because I think that you need to hear from other patients who have the same struggles that you do, using a little bit of lotion on my skin. And that is, I was not a leaker until COVID. Now I got COVID last May. The coughing was so violent, I got stress incontinence. And thankfully it's much better, but I had to wear a pad for a couple months. And the pads that I wear, they're called Cora, the free to move bladder liner with an organic cotton lining, and no problems with this at all. So Marlia, look for these. Look for these Cora pads. I think that they have an organic cotton top sheet, elemental chlorine-free wood pulp, a very absorbent core, made without chlorine, dioxins, dyes, fragrance, latex, and chloroform. These are fantastic pads. I should carry these in the IC Network shop. You know, we carried pads for many years, and then we just kind of stopped. Huh? Maybe I should. So no fragrance, no chlorine, no dyes. So think about, Marlia, see if you can find these, okay? Now, the fact that you're flaring a little bit with the estradiol, see, the problem with wearing pads every day is that they pull moisture out of your skin. And if you're already in estrogen atrophy, you're actually damaging your skin more. So the other thing you could do is you could use maybe V Magic. Let's see, here it is. So I would suggest that maybe you add some V Magic to your daily routine, because this will add a barrier between your skin and the pad and will prevent some of that dryness. So V Magic is really fabulous. This is very popular. If you can see that in here, it looks like Vaseline, but it's not sticky like Vaseline. It's the closest of any pad to mimicking natural mucus. I mean, it's really fantastic. And remember, your skin has to be, your natural mucus down there is a little oily because it's designed to repel water. And so it's meant to be oily. It's meant to be kind of slippery like this, to push urine off of your skin. So Marlia, I would think about adding this. You could also do coconut oil. The problem with coconut oil is it soaks through everything. So it gets very messy and very embarrassing, because here you are, like I was, wearing a long black sundress. And when I took it off at the end of the day and I looked at it, it looked like I'd wet my pants, but it was actually oil. It was actually from me sitting on the coconut oil. All right. Donna says, grief and IC, the big stress factor, underlying factor. Yes, absolutely. You saying that for an IC Awareness Month campaign? How would we do that? Eddie says, I'm on vacation with a family at the beach and have the worst flare of my life. Extreme IC flare up plus diabetes insipidus. I always get worse when I'm at the beach. I'm not sure if it's the beach. Honey, it might just be how you got there. Here, hold on a sec. IC Network? It is, honey, but we're doing a live support group meeting right now. I can take your phone number and call you back in a bit. You want me to do that? Yeah, you can definitely call in the morning. Just remember, we're in California, so we're 3 hour. It sounds like you're back east. So what's early for you, we might not even be open. So, try to call around 9 o'clock Pacific time. Okay. Okay, that sounds good. Okay. Bye-bye. All right. I always have a little angel on my shoulder. My angel whispers in my ear, that's an important phone call, take it. So I rarely ever answer the phone during meetings, but it turned out that was actually kind of an important phone call with a patient. So, all right. So Eddie, getting back to you, Eddie. So it's very common to have flares on vacation. The very first thing that we're going to think about is how you got there. Were you driving or on a plane? I would be looking at a pelvic floor flare for that. Um, uh, have you changed waters? Are you drinking things that you know are bladder irritating? Those would be things that I would be looking at too. So let's bring it all back. You came in a car. Eddie, and you guys, we're simulcasting right now. When I look here, I'm looking at Facebook. When I look over here, I'm looking at YouTube. Okay. So Eddie's on YouTube. So Eddie, how long was the car ride? How long were you in the car? And you guys, you're on a time delay, but it's only 10 seconds now. It used to be a minute. So you'll be able to reply more quickly. Mary here on Facebook says, I started a new TT and tagged news stations. There seems to be so much awareness about other conditions in these stupid studies on other things. I know. Well, the news media, they go for cancer. They're going to go for happy endings. Chronic diseases, especially things that involve the bowel or the bladder, are going to be the least compelling for them to write about. I mean, we've done a lot of media. I've been on TV shows. We've had a lot of magazine articles on IC, things like that. But it's a hard sell to talk about it. I would be tempted. The bladder disease is not a disease. Hey, were you told that you had an incurable bladder disease? Have you been on medications for decades and they never got better? Maybe you don't have a bladder disease. Maybe instead you have something else that's going on. I'm kind of also compelled to think about, I'm very motivated to talk about the tens of thousands of women who've been told they have an incurable bladder disease when all they really have is estrogen atrophy. And think about the money. Think about the money the drug companies are making on them, selling them antidepressants and all that sort of stuff, when in fact the most effective treatment is going to be just a simple estrogen cream. Eddie says it was an hour and a half car ride. Okay. So Eddie, if I were in your shoes, I would, let's just break this down into simple, easy steps. Okay. I want you to rest. I think it's important to rest. Try to just put your feet up, drink some water, try to dilute your urine a little bit. Let's just try to calm everything down. If you've got a heating pad, throw a heating pad down on your over your bladder and on your pelvis. Let's try to calm those muscles down a little bit. Donna, hold that thought. I think the ultimate question is when is your pain the worst? Before you pee or after you're done peeing? If you have tremendous pain as your bladder's filling and you feel better once you urinate, I would be focusing on bladder strategy. So I'd be diluting my urine, maybe sucking on some Tums, a little bit of pre-leaf to alkalinize my urine, maybe go get some azo bladder pain relief tablets, the pyridium that will numb your bladder wall. Those are going to be the probably the most effective things to get you through this. Now, listen, if you've been swimming, there's a chance you picked up a UTI from a swimming pool or the ocean. So I would, when you go to the drugstore for the azo bladder pain relief tablets, go to the drugstore also and get a UTI test strip and test your urine, and let's see if you might have a UTI. If your symptoms are really, really severe or you're starting to see blood in your urine, go to an outpatient clinic or go to the ER. Okay. If your pain is worse after you're done urinating, then we're going to be focusing on relaxing your muscles. I'd be doing a lot of deep breathing. I would be doing your stretches. I would be doing anything your physical therapist told you to do to try to relax some of these muscles down. No high heels, nothing at all like that. Just calm everything down. Mary says, how come we don't have walks or runs for it like others? Well, the ICA has done some walks and runs. Listen, IC Awareness Month, you got to understand the history of IC Awareness Month. IC Awareness Month was originally IC Awareness Day, and it was the day before Thanksgiving. And this was created by the original ICA, which is not the current ICA. The original ICA began in California. And that was the first Interstitial Cystitis Association, and they were around for a couple of years. So their IC Awareness Day, they were the first ones to do it, was dedicated to research. They were dedicated to research. They were an amazing group. But then the other ICA was created on the East Coast. And they all got in a turf war, and the California ICA lost, and the New York ICA won. I don't know why the New York ICA did not pick up the IC cause. This was well before my time. Once I was involved in the IC movement, was IC Awareness Week. And IC Awareness Week was in October, and it was managed by the company that made Elmiron. And I know this because they asked me to be involved and interviewed me, and we did stuff. And their version of IC Awareness Week was to send out promotional materials for Elmiron. I was really quite appalled that it became a marketing opportunity. It wasn't an outreach. It wasn't, hey, help me. It was, hey, another great opportunity to sell our medication. Well, then there was another turf war for which I am not involved, which I do not need to get into. But let's just say that there were bad feelings in other parts of the IC movement. And that company backed out. And so we had no IC Awareness Month for a year, IC Awareness Week for a year or two. And I'm like sitting back here in California going, so is the ICA going to pick it up? No, they didn't. And so I picked it up and made it a project of the IC network. And the first thing we did is we did a vote on when should we have it? Because the problem with doing IC Awareness in October is breast cancer dominates all media. So we couldn't get any press. So we voted collectively to move it to September, which is why September has been IC Awareness Month for well over a decade now. The second thing we did is we voted on a color, and the color was turquoise. That's been the color for ages. Somebody said it's pink. It's not. It's turquoise. And I modeled IC Awareness Month after Women's Health Week. And the thing about IC Awareness Month is it's not about me. It's not about the IC network. It's not about the ICA. It's about you. It's not to sell anything. I'm appalled by that. The way I created our IC Awareness campaign materials is you're the one living in your community. You're the one who knows if you're being treated well or not. So what we've done is we've given you materials to use in your community to make things better in Chicago, to make things better in Philly, to make things better in Atlanta. And Jill Osborne and the IC Network and the ICA are not mentioned unless they want an expert interview, right? I'm not going to use that as an opportunity to raise money. I think, and this is where I got into trouble when I was an old IT support group leader years ago. We did our first conference, and quite honestly, the ICA was furious with me for not giving all that money to the ICA. They wanted me to charge an entry fee. And I went, no, it's free. I'm not charging anybody an entry fee. They're like, yeah, but you need to fundraise for us. And I went, I'm sorry, I'm not fundraising for you. This is an IC event for patients in crisis. There will be no charge. I did not make friends when I made that rule. And so my version of IC Awareness Month is very different, and that is it's not me telling your story, it's you telling your story. It's about you printing out a poster and taking it to your library. It's about you asking your city council to declare September IC Awareness Month, which dozens of IC patients have done. I have samples. Look. Look at this. The city of Fairfield, California, dedicated. This was 10 years ago. This was back when we were in October. But you can do things like that. I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Oh, okay. And the other harsh reality for me, we have IC Awareness Month facts. I put those out on our media. You can share all those facts. It's about you. The other very, very harsh reality is that September is fire season for us. That's new in the last 5 years, and that has greatly limited my ability to do anything. And so you cannot depend upon me to speak for you in September and October. You have to speak for you. My story is not your story. And the more of us we can speak out about that, the better. The IC Awareness Month website is icawareness.org. Okay, I want to come back here to YouTube. Eddie reminds us that he's a man, not a woman. Okay, so Eddie, you have pain after urination. You're having a pelvic floor flare, hon. So this is all about relaxing those muscles. You shouldn't be bike riding on your flare. On your vacation. That would be a catastrophic mistake with a pelvic floor flare. If you can make yourself a heating pad, bring a heating pad. Hopefully you maybe even have some body heating pads. If you have a muscle relaxant like baclofen, BACLOFEN, you can take that during the day. It's not sedating. You can go to Disneyland. You can do whatever you can, and it just keeps your pelvic floor muscles kind of chill. If you have Flexeril or a Valium, those can be sedating, which means you might be sleeping on your vacation. That might suck. So we don't necessarily want you to sleep on your vacation. You could call your doctor and see if your doctor would prescribe some baclofen for you, maybe. You need to tell them that your pain is after urination. And listen, whenever I travel, whenever I go anywhere, I always bring my muscle relaxant because I can tell you hands down that being in a car more than an hour will trigger pelvic floor spasms for me. And I've got to drive 3 hours on Thursday minimum to go to my TMJ specialist appointment. And you can darn well bet when I get home, I'm probably going to be taking my Flexeril just to get those muscles nice and chill. And I will be wearing a body heating pad on my underwear. Hold on, let me get some. I just got some. Hold on. Where did I put them? Hold on a sec. Okay. All right, my friends. I got to tell you, this is my secret. This is my secret weapon for me. These are body heating pads. We've been selling these for 20 years, and they're almost the same price. It's like $4 or $4.25 for 3. They were $3.99 for 15 years. Let me grab some scissors here. I love my heating pads. Almost every day I wear one, usually between my shoulder blades because I get back pain. if I'm working for a long period of time. So here's a single envelope. Look at how thin they are. Do you see how thin they are? You tear it open, pull it out. That's how thin they are. You activate it when you peel off the back. So now I've activated it. Now you don't put it directly on skin, you put it on clothes. So you can put it on your underwear. You can put it on a t-shirt. Make sure you put it on cotton. Don't put it on something that can melt like polyester or nylon because it's going to get hot. It's going to take about 45 minutes to heat up. Once it heats up, you're going to have a good steady source of heat for a good 6, 7, 8 hours. So if I'm driving for a long distance, if I'm flying anywhere, I'm always, always, always going to be wearing one of these. And so let's see. Now I've already activated it. So I think what I'll do is I'll just put it on my back. Let's see. And you can hide it on the inside of your clothes. I'm going to try to hide. Well, no. I don't want to. Okay. I was going to say for me to do that right, I'd have to drop my shirt, and I am wearing a sports bra, but you don't need to see my bra. Okay. Mary says, I think the atrophy angle would be a good one. I hear a lot about that of women with menopause. Yeah, I'm very, very invested in wanting to make sure that that people who are mistakenly thinking that they have an incurable bladder disease when they don't. It's not a disease at all. It's just estrogen atrophy for women. And again, for men like Eddie, 9.9 times out of 10, it's usually a muscle injury, a pelvic injury. So there's one other thing that I want to mention to you, and that is Netflix has dropped an incredible documentary featuring Matthew Broderick, and it is so good. It is called Painkiller. You want to know why you don't get access to pain care now? Watch this. Watch the absolute abuse and evil that this company that no longer exists, Purdue, in their desire to make money, they created all of this, OxyContin. They told doctors that this pain medicine was not addictive and safe. It was the safest pain medication on the market. They told doctors that they were practicing malpractice if they didn't give their pain patients OxyContin. And they had Purdue bunnies, pretty little girls in tight dresses going to all these doctors' offices to sell their product. They were appealing to, they were using sex to try to drive some of these sales. They were ignoring, absolutely ignoring what was happening. And they were just flat out lying. And it's really, really well done. It's called Painkiller. It's a limited series released this year. I'm on episode 3 right now. And I just, you know, when I got my pharmacology degree, my advisor just said, don't ever get a job in drug sales. Don't ever try to work in sales for a drug company. And it's like, why? It's like the perfect background. And it's like, because you know too much. You know too much. And you have a conscience. You know, they would take people with no medical background at all, send them into doctor's offices and telling them that it's safe. And it all went back. But the crazy thing about it is they kept saying, well, the New England Journal of Medicine says it's safe. They would go, do you believe the New England Journal of Medicine? Most doctors would be like, yes, but they didn't say it was a letter to the freaking editor in the New England Journal of Medicine that said it was safe. It wasn't even a study. And so if you can watch this watch Painkiller, because I think that it will help you understand the obstacles. It will help you understand why we're in the state that we're in right now with fentanyl. It will make you more knowledgeable and informed so that when you do have pain, you'll be able to talk with your doctor a lot more effectively about that. One of the things that I say to patients, because I mean, they're now like at the point where they don't want to give opiate medications even after surgery. Like you've just been cut open and they're not going to give you a strong pain med? What the hell? No. So I don't have a lot of trust about pain care right now. And so when I was in my pre-op for my hysterectomy, I mean, I just flat out told my OBGYN, I'm not doing it unless I have pain meds, period. I don't want a lot. I don't need a lot. Just give me through the first week. And he's like, yeah, we'll give it to you after the surgery. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I won't do that. I want the prescription now in my hand. I want the prescription filled and next to my bed so that when I get home, I know it's there. And I just flat out said, I don't trust your staff. There are too many people out there who would say no. So if you want me to have the surgery, you're going to give me pain care. And he's like, not a problem. I'll give it to you. And interestingly, I really only used it for a week. I really only used it the first 2 days like a half a pill every 2 hours for the first 2 days. By the end of the week, I was doing a quarter of a pill every 4 hours, but to tell somebody who's just had their body cut open that they can't have pain care, I think is just a crime. And the doctors might say, yeah, but the research shows that Advil or Tylenol works just as well. Listen, I got to tell you, my mom had a hip replacement on Tylenol and Advil. She's very allergic to opiate medications. And the hip replacement didn't work, and they broke a bone while they were doing it. The pain was so bad that she refused to get it repaired because she couldn't go through it again on Tylenol or Advil. So there you go. Painkiller, Netflix, massive, massive encouragement. One of the guys that I work with has very, very strong connections to the film industry. And so we have been talking about doing a documentary on IC. And if anybody can do it, he can do it. And so we have been talking about that for a little bit of time. And so maybe we'll be able to get that. We do have a documentary that came out of Italy last year, but it was kind of weird. It just didn't present the case well. So just know that we're working on it. Danielle said, I missed you last Sunday. I guess you weren't on. I'm trying and agony tonight. Honey, the reason why, I apologize for not being on last Sunday. We had something very sudden happen. A museum called on Friday and offered to buy my father's entire estate of radios. He had 1 ton, probably 2 tons of radios underneath our house, old World War II radios, ham radios. And because I was the one who would have been charged with selling these radios one by one, and there are hundreds of them, this was a great opportunity for us to just let them go. I'm so happy that I don't have to waste a couple of years trying to sell these bit by bit. They took them all. So that's why I wasn't here on Sunday. They would not give me painkillers, but that's because I'm on methadone, and thankfully it helped me during my hysterectomy and still now that I'm having pelvic floor severe pain. So Danielle, just remember with your pelvic floor, a lot of the pelvic floor pain is coming from muscle tension. And so it would be talk to them about potentially trying a skeletal muscle relaxant to see if relaxing that muscle will reduce some of that pain, or even a vaginal Valium suppository. And Advil does not even touch my pain. Yeah. Advil, listen, when my IC pain was at its worst, Advil, Tylenol, Pyridium did nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I went without pain care for a year until I ended up in the emergency room at Lake Tahoe. Ironic, pharmacology degree never dawned on me to think about a pain med for a bladder problem. I'm bawling my eyes out up at Lake Tahoe. We took the train up there. Worst thing to do in a flare is take a train ride. Oh, let me tell you. And they gave me a shot and it turned all my symptoms off. And I was like, what? wait, what? You can turn this off? Like for the first time in a year, I didn't have to use the restroom every 15 minutes. I was gobsmacked. It was like, what? And it was an injectable pain med. I don't remember what it was. And I was like, whoa, wait, there's hope. I don't have to live like this. And they gave me a very small prescription for the drive home. My mom drove me home as I writhed on the back seat in agony. That shot was great, but it wore off after a couple of hours. And then I ended up in the emergency room the next day here, also in agony from everything. And having that little tiny bit of pain med really gave me hope. But there's an art to using pain medication, guys. I mean, listen, I chaired the California Pain Conference several years ago. I've testified up in Sacramento about this. Fighting pain is like fighting a fire. You never let the pain get out of control. You always nip it in the bud, early. So if you have a little fire in your trash can in your bedroom, what do? You pour a glass of water on it, done. But if you let the fire get out of control and it goes up the side of your wall and it involves your drapes and your whole room, that's going to take a hell of a lot more water to kill that fire. So fighting a flare is exactly the same way. You got to nip the flare when it's very, very small and early. And so my rule is, and I haven't had to do this for a long time. I mean, the last time I had to do this was after my surgery. Is if I'm in pain for 30 minutes, and I don't mean the little pain, I'm talking about the kind of sharp, I want to say crushing, but that's not the right word. There's a difference between minor pain and major pain. And the major pain dominates your thoughts. You're not walking well. You got your hand over your belly. So my old rule was if I have that pain for 30 minutes, I stop what I'm doing, grab a hot heating pad, lay in the recliner for 15 minutes, just try to chill everything down. And if 30 minutes later, that pain is not resolved, I gave myself permission to take a tiny 1/4 of a Vicodin, which is an opiate, but it was 1/4 of one pill. And my rule was wait an hour. The mistake the patients make when they're given pain medicine is they go, oh, this is a really bad flare, I better take 2 pills. But you have to understand that you only have a small number of nerves in your spinal cord that transmit that pain. Opiates act on the spinal cord. So if a 1/4 pill will turn all those nerves off, there's no reason to take 2, right? And so you never double or triple. You always start with a very, very low dose. And let's, again, early on in the process. And of course, you have to work with your doctor and your pharmacist to find the right strategy for you. The right strategy for me was a 1/4 of a pill. And I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, an hour later, my pain was entirely gone. And I did not have to take any more meds. If the pain wasn't gone an hour later, I gave myself permission to take another 1/4 of a pill. So now I've taken a half a pill in 2 hours. And I will tell you that almost always worked. So nobody can accuse you of being a drug abuser if you're taking a 1/4 of a pill once every 2 or 3 weeks, if you're nipping that pain in the bud. I hope that makes sense. I hope that kind of makes sense. So I've only taken 1 pill once, and that was the first time I took it, and immediately made me nauseous and dizzy. Some people would interpret that as an allergy. It's not. Allergies happen when your throat swells. It was just too much for me. So pain care it's a learned process. And obviously, we don't want to have to go to strong medication if we can nip this pain early. So again, if you're having a bladder wall flare from you ate something you shouldn't eat, and like Mountain Dew, you know who I'm talking to. Okay, what are you going to do? You're going to dilute your urine with some water. You're going to alkalinize your urine with some some pre-leaf or some Tums. And let's just get rid of that chemical irritant. There's kind of no reason to take pain meds at that point in time. But if you're in a wicked, wicked long flare because you're doing Mountain Dew every day, don't do Mountain Dew every day. I'm sorry. Now I'm not kind of making a lot of sense. You have to work with your doctors for pain care. You got to get on it early. The earlier you get it, the less medication it takes to nip it in the bud. If you wait until you're crying, you're letting your entire nervous system get involved. You're letting your muscles get super, super tight. Gay says, when I have to take a pain pill, I have to eat something. Yeah, sometimes. There are some medications which you cannot cut. If it's a time release medication, that's a big problem, because if you cut it, you can overdose it. So again, you have to work with your doctor and you have to work with your pharmacist to see what is available to you. One of the things that I often suggest to patients who are, let's just say you're going to have a hydrodistension, and this was back in the days when hydrodistensions were very painful, is say, listen, doc, can you and I agree that if you give me 3 total pills, I will not become an addict if you give me 3 Norco. This is how I intend to use it. I'm going to cut it in quarters. I'm going to try to stay ahead of the pain. Can you and I agree that 3 pills of Norco will not create a risk for me to become an addict? And the thing is that if you use it sparingly, that might last you 2 months or 3 months. I feel like I'm not making an important point here. The American Urology Association guidelines for IC want pain addressed at every single appointment. They want pain treated promptly and aggressively. And they support the use of opiate medications for the pain of IC because the pain of IC is rated equivalent to terminal cancer pain. This is not little pain. This is organ pain. It's characterized by being relentless and difficult to ignore. For anybody who tells you when you're in a wicked IC flare and your bladder is screaming at you, the Advil's going to touch it, they're full of shit. I have been there. When your bladder is screaming with Hunter's lesions, Advil in all likelihood is not going to touch it. There are moments when using an opiate medication is appropriate, and that's what the American Urology Association says. What's not okay, and I'm going to tell you a true story. Here's an example of somebody using pain medication completely inappropriately. I had a husband call me whose wife was in severe pain. Just diagnosed with, she'd been diagnosed with IC for, 6 months, a year, something like that. It's like, Jill, she's in bed all day. I don't know what to do. I've lost my wife. And they knew nothing about IC, right? Nothing. It's like, okay, so let's start at the basics. And this was back before subtypes. It's like, do you know about the diet? No. Okay, what's the diet? Well, think about if you have an injury to your bladder, then if you pour acid on a wound, it hurts, right? So we know that foods irritate the bladder. So what we want to do is we want to make sure you're not accidentally shooting yourself in the bladder. So diet modification is really, really important to IC care. So this means no coffee, no green tea, no black tea, no soda. And he goes, oh, God. Well, listen, she loves her Diet Coke. That's all she drinks, is Diet Coke all day long. Okay. And it's like, okay. And he just flat out said, she'll never do it. She'll never do it. She's addicted to her Diet Coke. Well, let me talk to her. So I guess she gets her on the phone. And literally, from the first word she says, I don't care. I love my Diet Coke. I'm not stopping it for anybody. And it's like, now, honey, you're in bed right now, right? Yes. So you can't drive your kids to school, right? No. You can't go to a movie. You're not living right now. You can't do anything, right? She goes, yeah. Why? Because your bladder's screaming in pain, right? Yes, my bladder is screaming so badly. I'm taking, and she was taking a ton of pain medicine. So her daily life was pain medicine and Diet Coke. That's all it was. And I said to her, but don't you want to be a mom? Don't you want to be a wife? Wouldn't you like to get out of bed and go do things with your family? And her answer was, no, I'm perfectly happy with my Diet Coke and my pain meds. It's heartbreaking. She was a very, very addicted to both. She was addicted to Diet Coke and she was addicted to caffeine and she was addicted to pain meds. Well, he called me back like 2 months later, and it's just like, Jill, she refuses everything. This is all she wants. She doesn't care about us anymore. All she wants is her Diet Coke and her pain meds. And no hope. And I just had to say that she needed to be inpatient somewhere. That this was nothing that he was going to be able to do for her at home. She was a massive addict. And very sad. She was unwilling to do anything to get better. Anything. And again, coming back to this documentary, this explains why. That once you become addicted to some of these meds, especially time release meds, you know, it's absolutely awful. Danielle says, I'm in bed day and night, definitely not living. I can relate to the story 1,000%. The only difference is I don't drink soda or drink tea or coffee, and I don't drink alcohol. Okay. Renee says it takes tremendous will to break out. It does. It does. And I was very blessed in a way because when I was growing up, remember I was born in 1960. And the big drugs hit at the end of the 60s into the 70s. And so I had a neighbor Craig, who was brilliant. He was a brilliant kid, like brilliant kid who got high once and got massive brain damage from it, like vegetable. He just became a walking vegetable. He just took something, damaged his brain, never the same. And I remember the police coming across the street, and I saw what happened to him, and I was like, man, I'm not touching any of that stuff. None of the recreational stuff. But if I'm in pain, I am going to use pain meds, but I'm going to be very, very thoughtful, thorough about it. And I understand how they're to be used. I understand that less is more. And I'm not afraid of them at all. So Danielle, our challenge here is you're in bed day and night. We have to figure out what your subtype is, honey. We have to figure out what your subtype. So hold on a second. You guys remember, if I miss your message, it just means that it flew by so quickly. Don't take it personally if I don't respond to you. So Nicola wanted help working on her subtype. She has pain on bladder fill, urethral burning, urine odor, no frequency, minimal urgency. You also have a hypertonic pelvic floor. So Nicola, you are in the chicken versus the egg dilemma. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And for us, it's which comes first, the bladder or the pelvic floor. Listen, they're both involved. They cannot not both be involved because they're too interconnected. but one is driving the other. So what we have to figure out is what is your primary problem and what is your secondary problem. And that's going to be the same problem with Danielle. So you guys are in exactly the same situation here. So based upon what you're saying, pain on bladder fill, that means that your bladder wall is compromised to some degree. So that opens up two subtypes. So it opens up Hunner's lesions. Do you have wounds in your bladder? Or, which is, so that's group 1, Hunner's lesions. Group 2, bladder wall driven. And in the bladder wall driven subtype, there's no visible wounds on the bladder wall. But what there are, you could have a chemical injury to your bladder, chemocystitis, and that can be from going through chemo, using ketamine, drinking diet soda, okay, or coffee, whatever. The bladder, like any other part of the body, can be injured, and it's injured through some sort of toxic chemical exposure. The other thing we're going to look at for bladder wall driven is going to be estrogen atrophy. Is your skin getting dry? Have you had a hysterectomy? Have you lost your ovaries? Are you on birth control? Are you getting pleasantly older? That as estrogen levels drop, the bladder wall gets compromised and becomes more sensitive. So that's something else we're going to look at. And so you need to, number one, if your pain is really, really, really severe, and Danielle, for you, I think it's very, very important, given the fact that you're in bed all the time with pain, somebody needs to look inside your bladder and see if you have Hunner's lesions. Because the number one cause of very severe pain, long-term pain in the IC world, is a Hunner's lesions, an open wound in your bladder. So for those of you who have really, really severe pain, I mean, my personal philosophy is if I'm in pain, I want somebody to look at it. Why does it hurt so much? Please, somebody look at my bladder and tell me what the problem is. That's like step one. And they can do that now with a plain cystoscopy, not even with a hydrodissection. If they have the right equipment, they can see Hunner's lesions using a very special type of cystoscope. You'll know in 2 minutes. They just numb your urethra, stick the scope in, put a little tiny bit of fluid in there just to look, open it up a little tiny bit, not stretching the bladder. And that should allow them to see a lesion. You're done, pull it out, bam. You will either be told you've got lesions, or you might be told you've got a very red irritated bladder, but no open wounds. Okay, so the red irritated bladder means your bladder wall's been fried in some way, usually again by some sort of chemical. But if you have a perfectly healthy bladder, like me, I've had 2 cystoscopies. Every single time, your bladder looks great. And for most of us, our bladder looks great. So if they look in your bladder and they go, you got a perfectly healthy bladder, then okay, you got a perfectly healthy bladder. We don't need to waste time doing bladder stuff. It means that your symptoms are coming from outside of your bladder, that your bladder symptoms are secondary to another problem, which for many of us is actually tight pelvic floor muscles. So Nicola, you have no frequency. So that tells me your bladder wall's good. You have minimal urgency. That tells me again that your bladder wall's pretty good. Yes, you have some pain on bladder fill. Okay, makes sense. You have urethra burning. That points us to estrogen atrophy. The pain on bladder fill can be a little bit of estrogen atrophy too. But chicken versus the egg, depending upon your age, this could all be caused by your tight pelvic floor muscles. So, Nicola, if you're still here, how old are you? And are you on birth control? Have you had a hysterectomy? Danielle, thank you so much for sharing your story, honey. Thank you. Renee says the pain philosophy is correct. Don't let the pain get too far. Okay, so now let's go to Danielle. So Danielle is in bed day and night. So whenever I see symptoms are that severe, my brain goes in in two very distinct directions. And the question that I have for you, Danielle, is, does your pain get worse when you sit down, and does it get better when you stand up? Sometimes people stay in bed because moving hurts. And the reason why moving hurts is because muscles are so tight, they're squeezing nerves. So that's kind of one scenario there. And I think the other scenario is, do you have Hunner's lesions? There's got to be a reason why it's so bad. Can you tell us a little bit about your pain? Like, where is your pain located? Is it on the outside of your body, or is it inside of your body? And if it's inside of your body, where? Is it in your urethra? Is it in your vagina? Is it in your rectum? Is it in your bladder? Is it centered? Or is it to the left of center or right of center? And also, is there any event that you associate with the onset of your symptoms? Did you fall? Had you had a baby? Were you involved in sports? Were you involved in an accident? Was there any event that you believe triggered all of this for you? Marlia, hold that thought. Let's go back over here to YouTube. Diane says, and you guys, YouTube, I'm sorry. How long does it take for estradiol cream to replenish the bladder wall when you have estrogen atrophy? Well, it doesn't replenish the bladder wall. It feeds the bladder wall estrogen so that the bladder wall can start to grow again and produce mucus again. So estrogen doesn't replenish the bladder wall. Estrogen gives the bladder wall what it needs to replenish itself. And I know you meant that, honey. I know you meant that. When you look at the skin under an electron microscope, you see the skin immediately starts to plump up. Estrogen is vital to the health of that skin. I'm going to say, for me, probably 3 to 4 weeks before that skin really improved to the point where it was almost normal. But I felt an improvement in 2 weeks. Cecilia says, my pelvic pain is gone by stretching every day. It's been a miracle. I suffered pelvic pain for more than 20 years. So Cecilia, obviously you're a pelvic floor driven patient. I'm so happy for you. This is great. This is fantastic news. I just want you to remember that as you get older as a woman, you are going to go into estrogen atrophy, and your bladder wall might getting a little funky. And so just pay attention to the quality and health of your skin. If your vulva is dry and your vagina is dry, so is your urethra, so is your bladder. So you want to pay attention to your skin health. And when you start getting dry, ask for that topical estrogen. Bring that up. Marlia says, love all your suggestions, Jill. Got my first bag of Dandy Blend as I haven't had coffee in 5 years. Thank you so much. Dandy Blend is so good and satisfied my need for coffee. I make it iced hot and for a special treat with 1 scoop of vanilla ice cream. You could even make ice cream with it. I used to love coffee flavored ice cream. Oh God, I should do that. I'm taking a little break, not from the Dandy Blend, but from I use coconut milk, but I'm trying to cut way back on my saturated fat right now. So I'm going more for water and sparkling water right now. Okay, so Nicola says she has no Hunner's lesions. Awesome. So then that points us to your pelvic floor then, hon. You have hypertonic pelvic floor muscles. When you've got tight muscles, what happens? You enter a state of ischemia. Ischemia. That means your muscles are so tight, it's restricting blood supply. So are you going to have a healthy bladder if you got tight muscles? No. Is your bladder wall going to be intact if you have tight pelvic floor muscles? No, because your bladder's not getting good oxygen and nutrition. And so you've already had the diagnosis of hypertonic pelvic floor muscle. That's where I'd be spending my money. It's getting good pelvic floor physical therapy, really giving that a try and seeing how you do with that. And just remember, guys, that, I mean, listen, pelvic floor physical therapy just turned me around completely. So I don't have all that pain that I used to have. And I realize now that all the times that I thought I was having bladder flares were pelvic floor flares. And the reason I know that is that years ago, like 20 years ago, because I was a professional tennis player in my 20s. I love playing tennis, and I'm just trying to start again after taking a long break. But anyway, I had a little resurgence in my late 30s and was playing with a good friend who was also a pro, and love it, love it, love it. And I went and picked up a game against this man who didn't know that I was a professional tennis player. And he got really angry that I was beating him easily, and so he hit a ball at my face, like really hard as you could. I was at the net, bam, right in my face. And thankfully, I had good reflexes, got my racket up there, volleyed it off, won the point. But I felt a drop of urine, and I thought, oh my God, there's a puddle under me right now. I got so startled by that, right? So I kind of looked down and go, oh, thank God, right? I thought I had wet my pants. I did. And so for that next couple of hours, I deliberately held my pelvic floor very tight because I wanted to finish that match and teach that guy a lesson because he was being a bastard. And so I played deliberately tightening my pelvic floor muscles. I gave myself one of the worst bladder flares I'd had that night. And that's what proved to me that my flares were actually pelvic floor flares. Weird. Okay, Danielle says she was told that she had polyps in her bladder. Other than that, my story with my hysterectomy, they cut through my bladder to get to a uterus that was cut in a very complex surgery, as you know. I get severe aching in my perineal area. Yeah, so Danielle, you are a surgical injury patient. Thank you for refreshing my memory. I'm reminded of the quote, the greatest gift that a woman can give a man is to risk her life to bear his child. That came from a high school teacher, Jim Johnson, in high school. And I've never forgotten that because it really points to the risk that happens when you become pregnant and the injury that can happen when you have children. That some women have catastrophic injuries to their pelvic floor, catastrophic injuries to their rectum and their uterus and their bladders after having a baby. And that same thing applies to surgeries. As something as simple as surgery to remove endometriosis can end up lacerating the bladder and causing all sorts of other issues. So, surgical injuries are tragic when they happen, and it's unfortunate that they happen. I feel very blessed that my hysterectomy surgery did not. I mean, they tore my vagina. They didn't tell me that for a year. I was actually doing some pelvic floor work, and like 2 weeks ago, and I stuck my finger in my vagina, and I could feel where they tore it for the first time. It was so weird. So, very difficult. Kathy said, my primary issue is frequency and urgency. 10 times worse after first installation. Biopsy shows mast cells. Not sure if I should do another. I have no Hunner's lesions. So, Kathy, what did your pelvic floor examination show? Because now newly diagnosed patients are supposed to have a pelvic floor examination at their very first appointment with the urologist. And if those muscles are tight, you are to be immediately referred to pelvic floor physical therapy because the symptom of frequency urgency could be coming from your pelvic floor. It's interesting that I got worse after that first installation. What was the installation? What did they put in your bladder? Danielle said, sounded like a real Bobby Riggs. What a creep. Yeah. Yeah, he was gross. Now I just smile. I just play and smile, and I don't try to. I'm just happy hitting a tennis ball. I don't have to win. Best match I ever played, I lost. And I played against I was like 25, and I was playing against the women's 50 national champion. At the time, I was actually playing against a national champion. Her name was Georgia Buckley. And I had the best tennis match of my life. And we went 7-6, 6-7, 7-6. Tiebreakers every time. Had a huge crowd of people watching. She became a good friend. And it was just so fun to lose. And after that, I was like, I don't care if I lose. I just want to have fun. Kathy said it was lidocaine and it had an antibiotic and heparin. That shouldn't have caused issues. That should have made you feel better. Kathy, the problem though is some people are sensitive to lidocaine. You might be that person who's sensitive to lidocaine. And if that's the case, tell your doctor they could switch it to Marcaine. And if you had DMSO in it, the DMSO, sometimes they put DMSO in it to enhance absorption. That could be an issue. Renee said, could scar tissue be anyone's issue? Absolutely. Renee has scar tissue. She keeps it massaged. It helps a lot. Yeah, scar tissue just gets tighter and tighter. I could feel like a tight string of scar tissue in my vagina that I had never felt before. And I remember thinking, ooh, thank God I'm not trying to have sex right now. I'd love to be in a relationship. Don't get me wrong. I like sex just like everybody else likes sex, but you're going to have to go really slow after tearing your vagina. Kimberly said, I'm 60, diagnosed with IC 20 years ago. Pain before peeing and after. Pain outer vaginal area. Okay, so the outer vaginal pain is your estrogen atrophy. You use the estrogen 2 times a week, going on third bladder instill, going for pelvic floor physical therapy. After bowel movement, pain on the outer vagina, scope again, pudendal pain. So, Kimberly, is there any event at the age of 40 that you associate with the onset of your pain? Let's start there. And you're on a 10 or 15 second delay, so you can type it, but just wait a few seconds before you press enter. We always have to have YouTube on a delay because there are people on YouTube that sometimes come into rooms and mess with us. So kind of the rule of thumb is if I see symptoms begin in childhood, teenage years, 20s, we're really looking for physical injury. If I see symptoms begin at 40s or later, we're going to really suspect more estrogen atrophy, long-term chronic muscle tension, especially in guys. For guys, Eddie, if you're still here, we would definitely, we often see that kind of long-term muscle tension slowly building over time, especially motorcycle riders, horseback riders, eventually kind of get to that point where the muscles are so tight, you're actively symptomatic. So we're going to see that late 30s, 40s, 50s. Okay, so Kimberly, I have fallen down my steps before. You have a numb upper right thigh. Well, there you go. So Kim, did you suffer a tailbone injury? I can't tell you the number of patients who have fallen downstairs and that night, bam, their IC symptoms click in. Doesn't matter what sex. Renee says, fantastic tennis history. Glad you're getting back into it. Yeah, Lisa inspired me. Lisa, if you're here, Lisa lives in Houston and she's been playing tennis, and I've been so involved with my parents that I just didn't have time. But now I have time again. So I went out and played, realized I don't have good shoes anymore. So now I'm trying to find the right shoes. I got several pairs coming this week, and we're just going to try to find the right shoes. And then I'm going to go take lessons. I'm not ready to go play matches. I have to go take lessons again and build my strength up. Kimberly said, yes, years before, over many years, you've fallen 3 times as a child. So let me get my model. Hold on. So let us ponder the tailbone here for a moment. So hold on a sec. Let me, hold on, drink of water. You know, I already did a big long walk this morning, early. So I'm a little dehydrated right now. Let me introduce you to your pelvis. Hello. This is the front of your pelvic cavity. We've got your hip bones. We've got your pubic bone, right? Let us look at it from the rear. From the rear, we've got your spinal cord, your vertebrae for your spine. And then we've got this triangular bone right here, which is called your sacrum. And you're going to notice that your sacrum has holes in it. And so your spine actually comes down through the hole here in your vertebrae, comes down here, and then it feeds nerves through these holes, right? And at the very bottom of the spinal cord is your tailbone. Now, I want you to understand here that the tailbone does not operate in isolation. The tailbone is basically the center, it's the foundation for your pelvis and your pelvic floor. Look at everything that attaches to your tailbone. And what's interesting is we actually use our tailbone. It helps us balance. This tailbone's fairly dynamic. It's not as dynamic as a cat or a dog, but it does move a bit as your muscles move, right? So there's a lot attached to your tailbone. Now we have to look at the position of the tailbone. It's straight down, correct? It's not like this, or it's not like this. It's straight down. And if we look at it from the side, it curves under, right? It curves under. So think about you're walking your dog, and your dog is mellow. The tail is hanging down, and the tip of the tail is going between their hind legs. That's a normal, correct, healthy position for the tailbone. But if you have fallen and broken your tailbone, we've got a number of issues that happen. Number one, position. A lot of tailbones, they're kinked. A lot of tailbones are straight. They don't curve anymore. They straight. And kind of the worst case scenario is when the tailbone goes like this. Instead of curving under, it curves out. Can you imagine the pain of you trying to sit down if your tailbone is sticking out like this? And a lot of patients who are bedbound, that's actually what's going on. My symptoms started in 7th grade when I broke the tip of my tailbone off entirely. The tip, you can see this little tip right here. Like I broke that off. This free floated because I used to move it with my finger all the time. And so think about what that did to the muscles that were attached to that. Now everything's broken. And no wonder I had frequency urgency at the time. So when you go to physical therapy, Danielle, we have got to get them. Listen, here's your symptoms here. So let's go over your symptoms again. You were diagnosed with pelvic pain 20 years ago. You have pain before urination and afterwards. Okay. So the pain afterwards is your pelvic floor. The pain before could be your bladder wall. So why is your bladder wall compromised? Your bladder wall is probably compromised because you have a pelvic injury and your blood flow is compromised. Your bladder is not getting the blood it needs to be healthy. And that's why your bladder wall is more sensitive now. That's called ischemia. You have pain on the outside of your vagina. Well, that can be quite common with tight pelvic floor muscles. Tight pelvic floor muscles can cause vulvodynia. Tight pelvic floor muscles can cause rectal pain. Pelvic floor physical therapy has been proven to be effective in patients with vulvodynia. You're going to physical therapy now. So what do they say about your pelvic floor? Tell us about your pelvic floor. And most importantly, the question you always want to ask your physical therapist is, are your muscles slowly but steadily improving over time, or are you always locking back down into tension? Because if you are locking back down into tension, then we have to look at bones. And it may be that you've got a bad SI joint, like I do, a bad hip, a bad tailbone, a bad knee, or even a bad foot. Danielle, thank you so much for the 50 stars. Guys, if you find these meetings helpful, and I'm going to be real honest, it's been a brutal year here. There isn't a small business out there that has not been affected in 2023. It's been a really tough year for us financially. I mean, we're here. I'm still here. We haven't let anybody go, but we have reduced hours a little bit. And so if you find these helpful, it would be absolutely fantastic if you became a member. $25 a year to get literally the best magazine on IC to be had if you read it electronically. Or you can come over to our website and go into our shop and buy some heating pads or buy some bladder builder, one of the supplements if you want to try one of the supplements. That's what makes these meetings happen, and we really appreciate it when you bring your business to us. We are organized as a health education company, and that's why we get to sell stuff. We have our book, IC 101. We've got heating pads, chair cushions, all sorts of stuff like that. So, Kimberly, when you went to pelvic floor physical therapy, what are they saying about your muscles? Are they tight on both sides? Are they tight on one side? Do you have the name of the muscles? And ask them if your tailbone is in the right position. It might not be. It's quite possible. Okay, I think I probably, let me make sure I didn't miss any questions here. No, I did pretty good this time. All right, guys. Well, I am here for you. I am here to try to answer your questions. If you've got questions, please ask them. It's a Sunday. What else is going on? Do I have anything else going on? Okay, so here's what I'm working on. So we got the magazine done. Praise God, hallelujah. That, that was hard. So what am I going to be doing? I am working now. Well, I've got to write the press release for IT Awareness. I'll do that this week. I'll work on the IT Awareness Month website this week for you guys. And then I'm going to go right back into building our master class on IT. I am really, really in an awkward spot in the sense that there are people online selling coaching services and programs for IC for thousands of dollars. I find that really difficult to believe that's even happening. I could say use negative words. I don't want to do that because I believe people's intentions are good. Um, you do not have to pay thousands of dollars to learn about IC. This meeting is free. Our entire website is free. And but everything's changing now because people don't come to message boards so much. People don't come to websites so much. Everybody wants quick and easy videos. The shorter, the better. And so we are in the process of creating this very long, very detailed video class on IC to try to address IC education today. But I will tell you, if you visit our website, icnetwork.org, it is the best website on IC. It is rated the best by Harvard Medical School and the University of London. And I'm constantly updating stuff. And it's a labor of love, but it's a big old website and things, it's hard to maintain. Loretta says, can anything be done about the tailbone? Absolutely. Absolutely. Physical therapy can help. Chiropractic might help. But it begins with getting some imaging to see what's going on with the tailbone in the first place. Renee says, since becoming a member, I enjoy that magazine. I've ordered from the store. It's great. Thank you, honey. I think you'll really like this one. And since you're a member, you can download it right now from your member page. It is perfectly available right now. And it is in the process of being mailed to our people who get it by mail. It will go out this week by mail. Kathy said, my physical therapist wanted to use the wand I'm not comfortable with, so I'm switching to another who doesn't use the wand. Yeah, I don't understand physical therapists that want to use wands because ultimately what they feel with their fingertips drives their therapy. And so I'm going to agree with you on that. Renee says, not possible to treat online. I refer many people to your site for education. Thank you, Renee. Danielle said, you're truly a gift that teaches each and every one of us something. There's some guy that claims he can cure IC. He's located in Florida. I think he's snake oil. Oh, man, we had this lady who had a book on how to cure IC. She sold that sucker for 15 years. And it was $9 and then $20 and then $40. And what we ended up finding out is that she just swapped in disease names. So you could find that exact same book for other diseases. She just swapped out the disease names. And her conclusion was it was salt intake. And that was like my first encounter with just an absolute snake oil profiteer. Was that ridiculous book that was online on Amazon for so long. Here's my position on this. Anybody who tells you that they can cure everyone is a charlatan. Anybody who tells you that every patient with IC has infection, they're a charlatan. Anybody who makes wide-scale claims that we all have this or we all have that, they are not involved in the IC world, because the entire IC world, all of the researchers around the world now acknowledge subtypes, phenotypes. We now understand why so many patients never got better on bladder treatments. We know why. Because many of you don't have a bladder problem. You have a pelvic floor problem. And if you, especially in the last year, we just had our National Institutes of Health IC research meeting. Actually, it was last year. And it was all about the future of research. What are we going to do in the future? And because we all acknowledge that where we are today, treating apples, oranges, and bananas in the same study is absurd. There is diversity in this patient population. If people say there isn't, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. They've never been to a support group meeting, or they've never been to an IC conference. And the ultimate test is present your data. There are people out there who have made wide scale claims. Doctors out there have made wide scale claims. And when I talk to them, I was like, well, aren't you going to share your data with, present it to the American Urology Association? Aren't you going to have a poster so that other people can see it? Don't you want other people to benefit from what you learn? And their answer is, oh no, we wouldn't want to give that away. That's our thing. Well, like then who the hell are you in this for? Are you in it for you to make a buck? Are you in it to actually help this patient population? Because if you're not willing to share your data, then you're full of shit. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for swearing, and I shouldn't swear, but it pisses me off. And I'm thinking of a couple people right now who have made wide scale claims about, I see this, I see that, I can cure this, I can cure that. Prove it. Bring your data and let other doctors try to replicate your study. Share it. If you're hiding it, then it must not be very good. And there are a lot of people hiding stuff out there, making claims and absolutely hiding it. You have to be humble to be an IC researcher. You have to have a sense, and see, guys, you know, the gift of being older and like going to grad school and stuff like that is that you realize that for every question that gets answered, it raises 20 new questions. There's never a pure yes or no. It's like, why does the bladder break down? Oh, well, this happens. Oh, but so does that, but so does that, but so does that. How does it happen? You know? And so there's this real joy in following these questions. Why does Elmiron cause retinal disease? Well, isn't that strange? How could that happen? What's the theory behind that? Okay, and can we move beyond theory to data? And it turns out that the retina has a gag layer like the bladder, glycosaminoglycans. And if Elmiron attaches to the glycosaminoglycans in the bladder wall, well, guess what? It may be that Elmiron's also attaching to the glycosaminoglycans in the retina, causing pigmentary maculopathy. That's being tested. They're looking into that. And so you have to have a tremendous sense of humility to go to these conferences, present your data, and listen. You got to understand, doctors are hostile towards each other because they all have a position and they're all trying to defend their position. They're trying to defend their research money. And so when you go to a conference like the AUA and you go to the IC poster sessions, you get ready for a bit of a gladiator fight. Only it's a gladiator fight with data, you know, and they're not always nice to each other. But on the other hand, they're open to hard questions. And you have to be open to hard questions. You have to be willing to look at an issue from all sides. As Loretta says here, there are many snake oil people in IBS as well. You have to be very careful. And it's something I'm really trying to be very, very cognitive of. My greatest fear as a support group leader is to discourage somebody from doing the one treatment that might help them. Oh, I worried about that for years. I mean, this is my 30-year anniversary. Next month is my 30-year anniversary for starting my support group and being a support group leader. And that was just the one issue that I thought about consistently for 30 years, is I didn't want to turn you away from the one thing that could help you. So my job is to present options and to help you understand context and to help you understand the difference between cause versus effect. Your symptoms are the effect. You don't want to just chase your symptoms. You want to focus on underlying cause. Kimberly says here, I will ask more questions this week. I bought your book off of Amazon. Excellent. Thank you. I got a new book in circulating in here too, eventually. Kimberly, my life was very limited by elder care. I cared for my elderly parents, and they finally passed away in May. And I didn't want them. I thought I would have them for a couple more years. It was very sudden, and I love my parents very, very much. So I didn't have a lot of time to do stuff, and that's changed now. So I'm starting to do a lot more. So anyway, these conferences are just fascinating, and also too, I got to tell you, I also served on the U.S. Army IC research panel for about 10 years. You time out after 10 years. We didn't do it every year, but I did it a good long time. And and my job on that panel, we allocated millions of dollars for IC research. And we have confidentiality statements. So I got to see all the good stuff, all the good studies, years before you guys might see it, being part of that panel, right? And so we got to see new theories, we got to critique new theories, we got to say, you're kind of missing the point here. No, this looks really good, but have you considered this, right? There's like 4 people on the panel, 3 doctor researchers and me, the patient. Now, granted, I'm an extremely educated patient with a good pre-med degree, but still, So anyway, I can still remember that some of the studies were so abstract. I would have my medical dictionary, and I'd read the study, and I have to look up words like stranguria, like strangle, stranguria. That's one of my new words. It means that the urethra is being strangled by tight muscles, I think. I might be wrong on that. So anyway, there would be these studies that were just so hard to understand. And I'd throw guys, I got like $200 to look at all these studies, right? Like, it was not about the money. And I'd like write this summary, and just be doing my best with something that was just so incredibly arcane. I was like, I really don't get this, but okay, I'll wait till the meeting and maybe somebody can explain it to me. So we'd get into our meeting and we'd go through each study, and finally the study would come up and they go, so Jill, what's your opinion? My opinion would be, I have no freaking idea. I'm sorry, I do not understand this at all. And as it turns out, the other committee members would go, oh, us too. It's just crazy, the science. Anyway, I poo-pooed a study. And it was a study on adolescent mice where, they let the mice live for, and I love animals. They let the mice live for 6 months or 6 weeks, and then they killed the mice to do something. And I was just like, I'm sorry, I see absolutely no point in this study. And I ranked it like a 1 out of 10. I'm sorry, I do not get this study at all. And I had this researcher literally scream at me in the meeting. Don't you know that mice go into total adolescence at 6 weeks? And he was really aggressive, like really, And I'm like, so? So? Jill, we're trying to mimic adolescence in humans. And I'm like, it's a mouse. It's not a human. Anyway, so these meetings are very adversarial, but ultimately in the end, you got to be willing to talk about it and accept the challenge. Okay. And so how do you truly know if you have IC? IC doesn't mean anything. Interstitial cystitis does not mean anything. It's a grab bag diagnosis. It means nothing. It means you have frequency, urgency, pressure, pain, and they don't know what to call it, so they're calling it IC. That's an old school approach to looking at it. And if you look at our guidelines for IC, and if you go back 15 years, everybody at the international level is saying interstitial cystitis is the wrong word anyway. Interstitial cystitis was a word applied to this group of patients back in the 1930s by Dr. Guy Hunter. The guy discovered Hunner's lesions, and the implication was that there was a problem or a defect in the interstitial layer of the bladder wall. That has since been proven completely false. The problem is that interstitial cystitis is firmly in our nomenclature here in the United States. The rest of the world, they don't call it IC anymore. They call it bladder pain syndrome or hypersensitive bladder syndrome. The only patients who are diagnosed with interstitial cystitis are patients with Hunner's lesions. And I think that's going to change too, because we now want to call Hunner's lesions Hunner's lesion disease. So ultimately, in the end, it's about your symptoms, hon. It's about your symptoms. And you are an anatomical mystery to be solved. You have a pelvic pain syndrome. Now the job is to do some subtyping, do some phenotyping to try to figure out what's driving those symptoms. Is it a Hunner's lesion in the bladder? Is it estrogen atrophy? Is it a chemical injury? Is it a pelvic floor injury? Is it a tailbone injury? Is it pudendal neuralgia? Or is it widespread pain coming from the central nervous system? And once we figure out underlying cause, then we can start focusing on the right treatments. Does that make sense? Okay. If you're getting up more than once a night at night, your bladder's talking to you. If you can't have sex without pain, we need to check that out. If you have blood in your urine, we have to check that out. If you feel a heaviness in your pelvis as the day goes on, you start feeling like you're carrying a bowling ball around in your pelvis, that's pelvic congestion syndrome. We got to check that out. The gift of medicine today is that we have a much clearer understanding of what can cause a lot of these things. The flaw with medicine today is that it's too expensive, and patients don't go, and you suffer at home, and we don't want you to suffer at home. You can't let fear stop you from getting medical care. You shouldn't do that. And at the same time, we all understand money is tight. Money is very, very tight right now for most of us. The only people who are not struggling right now are the billionaires. Screw them. Who knew we would have oligarchs here controlling stuff? Man, guys, listen. We need to stop letting the rich keep the poor and the middle class at war with each other. You know, that's the whole goal here, is keep the underlings fighting so that they can't see what we're doing. But that's the attitude of the super rich. We need to take our power back. Danielle says, what can be done about pudendal neuralgia? I truly believe that is the bottom line for me and my symptoms. Well, so with pudendal neuralgia, IC subtype 4 in the Chris Payne subtyping system, the first thing we want to do is figure out where the nerve is compromised. That usually means a nerve is being squeezed somehow, somewhere. So we want to try to identify where that nerve is. That's based upon your symptoms. It's based upon the dermatome. And then ultimately, they would do that maybe with a nerve block. And if they can turn your symptoms off with a nerve block, now we know exactly where the nerve is compromised. So if the nerve is being compromised by tight muscles, we got to work on the muscles. Got to get those muscles healthy again so that they're not pushing on the nerve. If, for example, this might be a little controversial, but I'm just going to put that out there. There are patients out there who are very, 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 very obese. And you have to understand that all that weight is being carried in your pelvis, and that's a problem because that's going to put pressure on your muscles. That's going to put pressure on other things. We have to work on weight if weight is an issue. And most importantly, we need to silence those muscles, and we can do that from the inside out and the outside in. So they might give you lidocaine. They might give you a lidocaine cream to use on your skin to just try to get those nerves to silence a little bit. We're trying to directly and actively calm those nerves down. And that's where palmitoyl ethanolamide, PEA, can be quite helpful because that kind of calms nerves down from the inside. But Danielle, I mean, honestly, listen, honey, your case, your case is a hard case because you are a surgical injury patient. The single most important thing for you to do is to study this book, girl. I don't remember. Do you have this, Breaking Through Chronic Pelvic Pain? Because this is the book that will help you understand how the muscles and the nerves and the scar tissue are influencing each other. And it's filled with success stories. Anne says, so if you pee 3 times a night, what is that? Well, it could be a number of things. That could be some estrogen atrophy, making your bladder wall more sensitive. That could be an early sign of kidney failure. That could be drinking too much coffee or soda in the day, or even drinking too much water near the end of the day. It's very difficult because we women change as we get older. Things get more sensitive and more vulnerable as we get older, men and women. It's very annoying. Danielle says, I don't have it. Please tell me how. Danielle, it's on our website. It's called Breaking Through Chronic Pelvic Pain, and it's $6 cheaper on our website than Amazon because I have a special deal with the author, who's a lovely, incredible man. It took him 15 years to write this. A urologist who absolutely saw that bladder treatments didn't work for the vast majority of patients back in the 80s. And he is the guy who who became the master at muscles. He is the guy who's talking about tailbone injuries. He is the first one. This book is a masterclass in pelvic anatomy. This will help you work with your doctors more effectively, and it will help you make the connections. We don't look at the back. This is Dr. Jerome Weiss. I've met him many times. And outspoken, let me tell you, he went to the national conferences and kept pushing the doctors, the urologists, to look at muscles, and they kind of laughed him off. But you know what? He was right in the end, and all those doctors were wrong. One of the big mysteries. So let's look at this for a moment. I mean, he had beautiful diagrams for men and women in this book. Beautifully, beautifully illustrated. And listen, every time I read a section, I learn something over again. And you can see I study. You can see that I highlight stuff, things that are important. Let me see. Why did I highlight this section? Let's see. This is a section on the sacrum, which is that triangular part at the bottom of the spinal cord and the feet. I won't repeat the exclamation Kevin uttered when I suggested that the voiding problem he had been experiencing for years, for which he had consulted multiple physicians, was most likely related to his feet. He had arrived at my office at the age of 43, experiencing profound frustration and deep concern about a weak urinary stream that worsened when in a public restroom, no doubt out of sheer embarrassment. My examination revealed overly pronated feet, for which I referred him to a podiatrist. So let me qualify this here for a moment. Diane, a good 6 weeks. Okay. So Dr. Weiss, like I said before, urologist who saw very, very quickly that bladder treatments didn't work for IC patients. So he was the first to really jump on studying, understanding other structures in the pelvis that can influence us, right? And so he became a master at muscles. He became a master at scar tissue. Very humble guy, flew around the world, got training from anybody who could get trained. He really wanted to understand the mystery of pelvic pain. And so if you were to walk into his old clinic and you had a trigger point or tight muscles, his massage was exceptional. You would walk out with very healthy muscle afterward. He was a master working with his hands to get his muscles healthy. But what baffled him, what became his real career mystery, was why did the muscles lock back down into tension for some people? Patients would call back a week later, a month later, say, hey, doc, the trigger point is back. I'm having all these same symptoms. And he's going, well, wait, we fixed this. We fixed this. You walked out with normal muscle tone. Why do we have tight muscle tone again? And that really became the mystery of his career. He wanted to figure that out. So he is the one who said, okay, we have to think about what puts long-term pressure on muscles. Hi, David. But bones. So if you're somebody who always locks back down into tension, no matter what the physical therapist does, we have to start looking at bones. Do we have a bad hip? Do we have a bad SI joint? Like I have a bad SI joint, which is an old tennis injury for me. It's the classic professional tennis injury. My left SI joint moves. So my muscles are always tight to hold it together. It should be stable. Mine is not. Do we have a broken tailbone that's out of position? That would certainly put the muscles back into tension. Do we have a bad knee? If you're limping, then your pelvis is tilted, which is going to put pressure on one side and not the other, right? But the breakthrough came when he met a podiatrist and he started looking at the role of the feet in the health of the pelvic floor muscles and the pelvis as a whole. And it took him years, but what he ended up finding is that 95% of his patients who had long-term chronic muscle tension were not walking correctly. So as an example, let's see here. So I want you to look at this first picture here. Okay, because you have to understand. So here's your pelvis. It carries the weight of your torso, but all of the stresses and forces when you walk, run, stumble are also redirected through your legs back up into your pelvis. You know, if you have your legs straight out and you are in a front end collision, you're going to break your pelvis because that force is going to come right up your legs, right into your pelvic cavity. And here's one. How would a rear ender affect the pelvis? The victim's right foot was on the brake when he was hit from behind. The force of the impact traveled up the leg via the hamstring muscle through the ligament, which connects to the sit bone and the sacrum. The momentum caused the weight of the upper body to exert a downward force. The muscles of the centrally located pelvic floor registered these as opposing forces and were traumatized. Okay, you could be okay. So here's a case study. A 37-year-old woman had sudden unexplained onset of pain in her buttock and leg that radiated down to her heel. She began having pubic and vaginal pain, urinary burning, and rectal spasm. These symptoms suggested a lumbar disc herniation, a UTI, hemorrhoids, and colitis, but all of these problems were ruled out with laboratory tests and an MRI of her back. Dr. Weiss's internal physical examination revealed pelvic floor dysfunction. My external examination disclosed a short leg, SI joint instability, ligament laxity, and a tender ligament. An x-ray of the patient's pelvis confirmed a short leg with a significant tilt at the base of the sacrum. A simple shoe lift and SI osteopathic manipulation combined with internal myofascial release to relax the pelvic floor muscles relieved her of her pelvic symptoms. Okay, here's another one. A 46-year-old fireman developed penile, perineal, and anal pain after lifting a heavy fire hose. Dr. Weiss's examination and nerve testing revealed a pudendal nerve injury for which he administered pudendal nerve blocks and internal myofascial release for 3 years. During this time, the patient had varying periods of relief, but unless he limited his activity, he experienced a pain flare. Concerned about the patient's limited progress and wondering if a biomechanical problem might explain it, Dr. Weiss referred him to me. I found SI joint instability and performed a series of prolotherapy injections to tighten the SI ligaments, which I want to do. This solved the problem. The patient had durable relief from his pudendal nerve pain, was able to discontinue his pain meds, and finally returned to work. Okay, so let us get back to the foot for a moment. And I want you to look at this picture. This leg is healthy and straight. So I want you to see that the shin bones are perpendicular. They're perpendicular to the floor. And when we get up to the femur only extends slightly to the side. And if you look close, you can see the piriformis muscle, which attaches the femur to the sacrum. You see that? That's healthy. Look what happens if your ankle rolls in. If your ankle rolls in when you walk, you're not straight. Now we're at an angle. And that angle is reflected all the way up the femur, straight to the piriformis, where look what it does. It stretches and strains the piriformis muscles. That helps us understand why there are some people who have long-term chronic pelvic floor tension because they don't walk. Now, one of the patients, I was working with a patient a couple years ago who had terrible pelvic floor tension. No matter what they did, they could not get her muscles out of tension. And she shared with me that she was born with a club foot. And she had never walked normally. And that's why her muscles were tight. And that's why she was having bladder symptoms. And my heart broke for her because that's congenital. And that's a very, very difficult situation. Renee here says that my issues start with my SI joint. I mean, yeah, very, very common. Let me see if I can find another one. All right, a 50-year-old man had been seeing me occasionally for over a 10-year period for intermediate pain, specifically perineal pain, which is that pain between the rectum and the base of the penis, or between the rectum and the vagina. And that was my hot point after I broke my tailbone. Like, oh my God, it felt like somebody had rubbed my skin with sandpaper. It was so bad. So here we go. A 50-year-old man had been seeing me occasionally over a 10-year period for intermittent perineal pain. I've been treating his tight pelvic floor muscles and trigger points with internal manual therapy. Though he received great relief from these treatments, pain flares inevitably occurred. Finally, I had never completely understood the mechanics of his symptom flares until he came in one day complaining of hip pain while walking over hiking trails. This led me to question him further and ultimately put us on the right track. I asked if there were any other musculoskeletal problems that he had not thought to mention previously. He responded that he always had pain at the base of his large toes, which he attributed to arthritis. But because he knew that other family members had the same problem, he never sought attention for this congenital issue. I then examined his feet, something I was not accustomed to doing, and found small bunions and moderate overpronation, and the light bulb went on. I had found the origin for his hip pain, the experience during hiking, and also for his intermittent perineal pain. Podiatric treatment eliminated his pain flares. Bunions are a sign of abnormal pronation, which lessens the shock-absorbing action of the feet, placing added stress on the leg and hip. This added stress affects the hip rotator muscles, including the obturator internus and piriformis. The dysfunction of these muscles can create a wide range of pelvic floor complaints, including perineal pain. This is a fantastic book, guys. You can get it on the IC Network website. Go into our book. It's going to change everything. It's going to change how you look at this. And it's a real masterclass. I mean, literally, the first 3 chapters are where are things located. Because I want you to be able, as you're getting examined, I want you to be able to visualize exactly what they're touching. You know, you got to be involved here. Is it your piriformis? Is it your obturator? Whatever. It's going to begin with your knowledge level, and you have to make a commitment. I mean, look at all this stuff I highlighted. I mean, over and over. Pelvic floor muscle dysfunction can cause stress, anxiety, agitation, and in some cases, total psychological meltdown in what is perhaps the ultimate mind-body connection. The explanation for this is that nerves from the deep muscles and pelvic organs travel to the primitive part of the brain, the medial thalamus, that connects to the brain's emotional centers. Consequently, muscle tightness around pelvic organs such as the urethra and anus can trigger a powerful emotional response. Because these nerve pathways from the pelvic floor to the brain's emotional centers are two-way streets, emotional stress can also travel in the other direction and cause pelvic floor muscle impairment. As you will see, then awareness of the possibility that pain can be traveling in two directions is of utmost importance when treating any pelvic pain condition. Now here we go, the tail of the tail. The story begins with a happy dog whose tail wags enthusiastically from side to side. As the story progresses, the dog becomes stressed and pulls his tail forward between his legs. The canine pelvic muscles are the tail waggers that tighten and relax in response to mood fluctuations. If the dog were prevented from wagging his tail, as is figuratively the case with pelvic floor muscle spasm, he would be extremely distressed. Humans and dogs have similar pelvic structure, though our extremely short tail cannot be observed. The expression "he left his tail between his legs" alludes to the mind-body connection I just described, as does calling someone a tight ass when he or she is uptight or emotionally repressed. Whether a rigid personality is a result of a tight anal sphincter muscle or vice versa is difficult to say, since in real life the two are closely intertwined. We do know, however, that when humans are stressed, the pelvic floor muscles respond by tightening and pulling forward, just like the muscle that controls a dog's tail. This action results in depressed, anxious, and irritable behavior. Not infrequently, the frantic state of the patient diverts the physician's attention away from the pelvis to the head, thus making it more difficult to recognize or even suspect that the pelvic muscles are the pain source. And this is only one of many diagnostic challenges that physicians face when dealing with pelvic pain patients. Phenomenal book. Anne says, is nocturia overactive bladder? No, not necessarily, because nocturia at nighttime can be a sign of congestive heart failure. It can be a sign of some kidney failure, so nobody can make that. Renee said, here, hold on. I lost something here. Danielle said, I could eat better. I don't eat vegetables. I lost an extreme amount of weight after my surgery, like over 110 pounds, which was not good, but my story is a bit long and complex. Bottom line is I gave up Pepsi 3 years ago. I was never a tea or coffee person, and I don't drink alcohol. But as I mentioned, I battled a pain pill addiction. I try to incorporate vegetables through drinking fruits and vegetables that they sell on the stores. But I do drink tons of water, but I stopped drinking at least 2 hours before bed because of the obvious reasons. Exactly. You know what I'm going to have for dinner tonight? I'm going to have spaghetti squash, baked spaghetti squash. I'm going to take the spaghetti out of the squash, and I'm going to make a little pasta with it. I'm craving that right now. I love Parmesan cheese, and luckily, Parmesan cheese loves me. Kathy says, that's me. I'm on Ativan for and amitriptyline for nerves from dealing with IC. Danielle says, so what are you saying is it's so true. My doctor during the examination while I was in the stirrups asked me to point to where it hurt. So I did, and he told me I was pointing toward the cervix, and then he offered me nothing after that except lidocaine cream, which did not do anything for me, particularly at the time. I did not know with the perineal nerve area until I started watching your videos. If I had known that then, I would have been able to explain more, but he was very much in a hurry to send me out the door, so I felt like nothing was completed, and he left the practice a month. After he returned, he was only there maybe 2 months tops. That's why I trust no doctors. Yeah. Anne says she had spaghetti squash yesterday. It's okay, honey. You're fine. Let me see if I can find. Let me see if I can find a couple of other very good. Oh, well, Danielle, here's a story just for you. Okay, look at that. I'm telling you, you open this book, you find something good in it. And ironically, this is Jill's story, not me, Jill. This is another Jill. And this is in the chapter on the pudendal nerve. Jill's story serves to illustrate how excessive stretching can damage the pudendal nerve. She was 32 years old, 4 months pregnant, when she developed severe tailbone pain. The pain became so severe she was unable to sit, walk, or sleep on her back or side. God, that sounds like me. Eventually, she began to have a horrible stabbing pain in the groin that traveled down her right leg to her calf. Any pressure around the tailbone or sacral area resulted in a pain flare. Other problems included painful intimacy and constipation. None of these symptoms were relieved with the use of potent narcotics or muscle relaxants. And as if all this were not enough, she was frequently experiencing total body twitches with extreme pain that required 17 hospitalizations for intravenous morphine. When Jill delivered her child, she was induced 3 weeks early and had an easy vaginal delivery. However, symptoms continued, and she still required periodic hospitalizations to control her pain. She was evaluated by many doctors, underwent a colonoscopy and an upper endoscopy, an abdominal ultrasound, 2 MRIs, a gallbladder study, an ENG, an electromyogram, and 2 CTs of the abdomen. Yet none of her 8 physicians could make a diagnosis, and therefore she was given fentanyl, a potent narcotic, along with hydrocodone and Valium to head off the spasm. I mean, wow. None of her symptoms were relieved with the use of these meds. When the pain continued unabated, she was offered a removal of her tailbone. Concerned that surgery might not help her either, and in a state of desperation, she made an appointment with me. By the time I saw Jill, 2 years after her symptoms, she was incapacitated, unable to work, depressed, relying on potent narcotics, and periodic hospitalizations in order to survive. Upon examining her, I found an exquisitely tender left pudendal nerve and active marked trigger points in the coccygeus muscles that attach to the tailbone. Interestingly, the tailbone that was scheduled for removal was not tender, although it lacked normal mobility. A pudendal nerve block was done at the time of that visit for stretch-induced pudendal neuralgia from her pregnancy. She had 3 hours of pain relief following the nerve block. And on re-examination, the pudendal nerve was no longer tender, but the untreated coccygeus muscles were still extremely painful to touch. After I administered an anesthetic injection into the trigger points I found there, she had her first period of sustained relief. Continuous work on the muscles with physical therapy and trigger point injections alleviated all of her symptoms. Jill's story is very common. It illustrates the suffering, unnecessary procedures, and expense that are the result of a physician's lack of awareness of pudendal nerve injuries. It also represents how reliance on expensive testing cannot take the place of actually examining the patient. Palpation of the pudendal nerve would have given away the diagnosis of pudendal neuralgia, and pain from the pudendal nerve can refer to the coccyx. If the coccyx had been examined, it would have been ruled out as a cause of the tailbone pain. And if the attached muscles had been examined, they would have been tagged for treatment. The take-home lesson is that patients should not agree to any testing or invasive procedures for pelvic pain without a thorough examination by a knowledgeable physician. I mean, Danielle, seriously, is that not the case for you? Let me go on. The next section's on compartment syndrome, the saga of a nervous wreck. We can all picture a compressed nerve. It looks flat. We cannot picture what happens to the compressed nerve on the microscopic level. To help you understand what's driving the severe pain pudendal nerve entrapment patients experience, pain that literally turns them into nervous wrecks, we need to investigate how a nerve responds to injury. As explained in Chapter 5, a normal nerve contains bundles of tiny, delicate nerve fibers. Each of these bundles is enclosed with a connective tissue sheath that is threaded with microscopic blood vessels. Nerve injury is triggered when the blood vessels are compressed and damaged within the nerve sheaths, which are in essence closed compartments. When nerve compression occurs, a destructive process takes place within the sheaths culminating in serious microscopic dysfunction known as compartment syndrome. The damaged blood vessels leak plasma and blood platelets, fluid that is unable to escape when it seeps between the nerve fibers and the sheaths. Not only does the trapped fluid compress the fibers, it also sets off an inflammatory reaction that can result in scar formation. Anyway, there's a lot more on that. So let's look at this. So here's a healthy nerve. And if I bring it in, you can see the individual nerve. Each individual nerve has an outer coating. You can see the nerve fibers in there and the blood vessels in there, right? Now look what happens when you fall. You fall on your butt. You know, when you get a bruise, you've broken a blood vessel, right? Okay. So when you fall down the stairs or you fall on the tailbone, you're not only compressing muscles, you're compressing nerves. And look at the damage that does. So now what we have is basically kind of a pressure injury. The blood vessels inside of this that normally help these nerves form, they're now leaking. And now there's too much pressure in here and you get compartment syndrome. And there's a whole section on treatments for treatment strategies for pudendal nerve entrapment. So number one, sitting. This may come as a surprise to you, but you, the patient, hold one of the most important keys to the successful treatment of PNE. Believe it or not, your practitioners can perform every treatment in the book and accomplish very little if you don't pay close attention to what you sit on, wherever you may be. This is the basic requirement for minimizing trauma. Anyway, absolutely fantastic book. Whole section on cars, buying hard seats and cars, how to shop for cars. Great pictures. Here's the nerves as they come off the sacrum and they go through the pelvic floor muscles. They merge in what we call the Alcock's canal, and then after the Alcock's canal, they split up again. So this is one place that nerve can be compressed right there. Danielle says painful intimacy, definitely. Along with severe constipation that has to be removed. Oh, girl, believe me, I have that same problem. Anne says, what is good for not emptying the stool completely? Well, getting your muscles as healthy as you can. And also making sure you're eating plenty of fiber. One of the if you're not eating fiber and drinking enough water, you end up getting packing. So your stools become like little hard rocks. And then, you got to remember the bowel is a tube. And it uses something called peristalsis to move your bowel movements along, right? And so there needs to be something to push against. And so a good, healthy bowel movement is a long tube. The perfect bowel movement is a long tube as it comes out of your body, and you look in a toilet and it's kind of bent it's bent. That's perfect. Oh, it's elusive. That's freaking elusive. It annoys me. I would love to have perfect bowel movements every day. It is weird. I went through a phase where I was just passing rocks. And let me tell you, my rectum hurt. And I went to IBS specialist, and that was absolutely the best appointment of my life ever with the doctor. And she said, so Jill, how many grams of fiber do you eat every day? And I went, I have no idea. Nobody's ever asked me that question, but I'm sure it's good. I mean, I eat good bread. I eat an apple a day. She said, I dare you, go home and count it up. She said, to have healthy bowel movements, you need to eat 20 to 25 grams of fiber a day. I went home, I counted it up. I was eating 6 grams of fiber a day, thus explaining hard rock poopies. and just increasing my fiber just dramatically improved all my constipation and everything. And so there are some really good fiber charts online. I will tell you the secret is peas or beans. I make it a point to have. I didn't last night, so I've got to do tonight. A big serving of green peas, or I like pinto beans. So whether they're refried beans or a can of pinto beans. One serving of peas is like 13 grams, 13 or 16 grams of fiber. I mean, it's fantastic. David on YouTube says, can chicory bother the bladder? I bought Dandy Blend and it was delicious, but I think it bothered me. I looked up chicory and I believe it said it can create histamine. You know, David, if you're very histamine intolerant, maybe. What I would do though is I would just, some patients just use too much Dandy Blend. You know, a little goes a long way. So if you did like a heaping tablespoon, that's too much. Do a heaping teaspoon and see how you do. Okay. So anyway, packing occurs when you don't have enough structure for the rectum and the bowel to push along. So what happens is you get little rocks that build up in your rectum until it's like full, and it's very uncomfortable. And it's moments like that when you got to use an enema or you got to use your finger. Danielle said, it hurts for me to sit down, so I stand most of the time or lay in the fetal position with a pillow. Danielle, girl, come on, honey. This is the book. You order this book tonight. Order it. And if you can't afford it, call me. We'll work it out. You need this book. Anne says, what are the fiber-rich foods? The best fiber-rich foods are going to be peas or beans. An apple. So how many grams of fiber have I eaten today so far? Let's see. 3, 6. I probably had 10 grams of fiber so far today. So I'm going to really have to buckle down and have some good fiber tonight. I'm going to sneeze. Danielle said, I feel to soften my stool, I take aloe vera capsules. I was taking them for a different reason. Then I found that it was actually helping to soften my stool. Also, if you want to go all natural, there's something called Swiss Chris. My grandmother believes in it. It really does help the elderly or people who are not very mobile. Interesting. Oh, thank you, Renee. Kathy takes magnesium for constipation. You know what? I do a little bit of xylitol because I also get dry mouth. And the xylitol, there's kind of, you can take a certain, everybody has their own individual level where you can suck on a few and you're fine, but if you go over that point, it can give you diarrhea. And so I probably suck on 5 of these a day at night. You know, menopause, things start to dry out. David said, is it a bad idea to drink baking soda? It is, because baking soda is sodium and it can raise your blood pressure. So a quarter teaspoon of baking soda in a glass of water is ideal. Anne says, biotin is good for dry mouth, also a dental hygienist here. You know, I did biotin for years, and I really like the biotin mouth gel. If I have like really, really severe, painful dry mouth, there's this little jelly you can put in your mouth and kind of coat your mouth with it. I really like the biotin jelly. I also really liked the was it toothpaste? But I didn't like the gum. There was a better gum than the biotin gum, and I think it was called Xylomel. Well, it might, you know what? It was the gum version of this, Xylomel gum. But I have TMJ now, so I can't chew anything. Danielle says, I love to buy a mouthwash. You know, the thing you got to understand about mouthwash is that you shouldn't be doing any of the mouthwashes with alcohol in them. Because, and this was research that came out like last year. Oh God, what was the research? It killed so much the beneficial bacteria that it actually ended up affecting something which then affected blood pressure. Yeah, so Anne said, get alcohol free. Absolutely. David says, yes, xylitol gives me diarrhea. It doesn't give me diarrhea unless I do a lot of it. So I can suck on a couple of those and I'm fine with it. I don't think that there's a lot of xylitol in these, to be quite honest. 2 melts is 1 serving size. Uh-oh, fire bomber. I hear a fire bomber flying over. Hold on, let me check. You always got to keep your eye on fires here in California. There is, and the big ones always happen on Sunday after these support group meetings. It's very weird. The really big ones, the big ones we had they were all on Sunday nights. Hold on, let me just look. There's a great website, flightradar.com. You can see all the active flights happening around the world, except for top secret flights. Yep. There they are. The fire bombers, 2 of them right there. They just flew over. Oh, damn. Really? Whoa, hold on. Oh, man, there's a fire right down my valley. What? That's close. Like we were just there. There's another one. Yeah, I can see the smoke. Son of a gun. Son of a gun. Danielle says it has no alcohol and it really works for her good. It's not that, I mean, you know, guys, it's probably 10 miles away and it's not real windy. You know, on the fire, listen, on the big fire days, that a fire will move 10 miles in an hour. So, wow. Hold on. God, I hate it when this happens. I just have to look at our county warning system. So I've got a fire to the west and a fire to the south right now. Okay. Okay, so a fire to the east and south. So the fire to the east is controlled. They stopped it 11 minutes ago. Okay. Okay, so that's not too bad. And the one that's south, it's in Petaluma. Huh. Huh. I'm not worried about that for me, but ooh, there's a lot of. Oh, well, just another day. Just another day in California fire country. No, 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 honey. We don't need to go. I don't need to go right now. We're fine. We are fine. But I got to be smart. I mean, so like you guys, 2 years ago, just to help to give you context here, I really want to give you context here. 2 years ago in October, I did a 5-hour support group meeting. It's a great meeting. And I was burnt afterwards. I went in the kitchen, I made dinner. So the fire was, so here in California, we're in Valley, Northern California. So we have valleys that go to east to west. We got the Sonoma Valley, then 10 miles of hills, and we got the Napa Valley. Okay, so the fire was north of the Napa Valley, right? So a good 20 miles away. So, and it had been going on for about a day. And I'm thinking, we're fine. I'd have to go across the Napa Valley, up this valley. Okay, fine. I had no worries about it, right? The wind picked up. So I do this 5-hour support group meeting. I left it all in the meeting, which I often do. Go make dinner, and then I crash in the recliner. And I just want to sit and just veg and eat my dinner. And on my cell phone comes a freaking alert. The fire, the wind had blown the fire all the way across the Napa Valley, halfway to my house. So I get the alert. The fire is 8 miles away. Now, 8 miles might seem a long way to you, but in these windstorms, it's not. 45 minutes later, the fire was right at the top of my hill. And as we drove away, the fire was 3 houses away. I had an hour to get everybody out. It was crazy. And it was a miracle. Our house was saved. It was saved by a bulldozer. So you got to understand that we have to take these very seriously. How many people died in Lahaina? Well, probably 100 now, probably many more. The people who die are the people who are left behind, the people who can't get out quickly. The fire comes up behind them in their car, or they die in their garage trying to get out. And twice now in my life, I've been surrounded at 4 sides with fire, and I had no place to go. East, west, north, and south. You have to become a master at country roads. And ironically, you actually have to drive towards the fire to get away from the fire, because everybody else is trying to get away from the fire. So you're stuck in traffic, and that's how the fire comes up behind you. The way I got away from the fire is actually drove towards the fire where nobody else was driving, and then I found a country road, and I took off down the country road, and that's how I got my family away. It's crazy. All right. So anyway, that's way off topic. Danielle says Hawaii's been having horrible fires. And you guys have hurricanes. Yep. Like my anxiety disorder is very well controlled, but I will tell you that at least once a day, I will have a thought about a fire or an earthquake. But I do my stop sign, deep breath, minimize the thought. I mean, that's just life right now. All right, guys. Well, listen. Any other questions? We've been going for 3 hours right now. A little bit more than 3, about 3.5 hours so far. So let's do last call for questions. Obviously, I can talk forever. Last call for questions. If not, my plan is to be here next Sunday. I don't have any plan not to do my meeting next Sunday, barring fire or earthquake. Okay, stop sign, deep breath. Minimize the thought, I'm not God, I cannot predict the future. For all I know, we will have no fires this year. Okay, any more questions? Any more questions? Otherwise, I'll see you next Sunday. But I might do a drop-in meeting on Thursday or Friday, probably Friday on Facebook. Okay? All right. Well, listen, go enjoy your Sunday. I am going to go to the store. So I will see you later. Be well. Bye, you